everyone.
Hello.
Sorry to jump in there. I have 7 o'clock. Oh, I guess that's just on my one device. That'll be our 1-minute warning. So do continue.
I'll give you, the last one was Drew Clemson. Drew Clemson. It was Drew Clemson, Elliot Killian, yourself, George, and Dick.
Yes.
Okay, now I do have 7 o'clock. Dave, are all board members here that are coming?
I got Hillary in the waiting room and I just hit join. She's jumping on now.
Fantastic. All right, I will go ahead and call to order the Tuesday, February 1st, 2022 regular meeting of the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors. Before we move to Dave's brief introduction on how to participate and roll call, I'd just like to say welcome to February, Black History Month 2022, and also Happy Lunar New Year. This year is the Year of the Tiger, so that does represent bravery and exercising evils, apparently. So that's interesting. So just imagining that might mean COVID. I feel like I'm projecting that to mean COVID with some hope. So I'll just start with that and open it up to board members to see if they wanted to say anything in acknowledgement of this day. All right, seeing none. Oh, looks like Tiara. Yes,
sorry,
Tiara. Sorry about that.
I couldn't get my hand
no
fast
problem.
Yes, yeah, it is Black History Month. I would have liked maybe a person to come kind of like with the Lunar New Year and maybe say a few things as well as Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I know it was weird how our meetings fell versus when to say anything, but I just think things like that are very important. You know, when we talk about Martin Luther King Jr., I think that's the only reason why I can honestly be sitting in the room with some of you all right now. And then, of course, with Black History Month, you know, just making it known, because Black history isn't just my history, it's all of our history, and it's the history of America. So, yeah, I just, you know, I'll be here for the future calls on that. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Tiara. And even just in the very near future, when we talk about our strategic plan tonight, it would certainly be a great time to delve more into that. So thank you. And anyone else? And Dave, so I will go to you so you can let us all know how best to participate and also do a roll call. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. This is the February 1st regular meeting of the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors. This meeting's been advertised in accordance with the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act as both a virtual meeting using the Zoom telemeeting platform, as well as an in-person meeting with the main meeting room being made available for the public to attend if they wish. If you're on tonight as a member of the public by Zoom, or if you're an agent here to speak on behalf of an agenda item, if you can provide your name, municipality, and if applicable, the agenda, a topic that you wish to speak on at the appropriate time. I will note that we did disable the chat feature because of some challenges that arose with respect to kind of managing the meeting and kind of keeping all of those things in order. So you won't be able to use the chat, but if you are here to speak about an agenda item prior to speaking, just please remember to announce your name, municipality of residence, and we can record that in the minutes. Just the general process items to cover. Everybody can just remain muted when you're not speaking to prevent any ambient noise from disrupting the meeting. That would be appreciated. If you're interested in speaking, you can either get the chair's attention by raising your hand, either your actual hand or your virtual hand. And then when you're acknowledged by the chair, you may unmute your microphone and provide your question or comment, and then go back on mute when your time has concluded. Secondly, board members are asked to indicate their name when either motioning or seconding a motion so that Rhonda can get the minutes to accurately reflect the action taken. And then in conclusion, I will take a roll call to ensure all members of the board can hear and interact by Zoom. Please indicate you're here when your name is called. Ms. Caldwell?
Here.
Ms. Danini?
Here.
Ms. Stevens?
Here.
Ms. Strickland?
Here.
Ms. Williams?
Present.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before we go to citizens input, I will just announce that the board did have an executive session, and that was on a matter of land acquisition and also on a matter of personnel. And Dave, would you mind refreshing our memory? Was that the 27th of January? Okay, thank you. And that was on the 27th of January. And with that, let's go to citizens input. This would be for any item that is not on the agenda. And if you did have a question as to whether the thing you wanted to speak on is actually on the agenda later, you could certainly ask also at this time if you just had confusion as to when the best time to speak is. With that, I'll open it up to citizens input. And as Dave has requested, if you could say your name and your municipality of residence, and then let us know your thoughts. Anyone care to talk? Okay, I see 2 hands have gone up. I'm going to go with Mr. Chili first. I think it was about the same time, but thank you.
Hi, Chili Allen, Ferguson Township. I'd like to talk about ordinance number 1069. There's been something added about smokers, and no one has yet to get back to me on the definition of smokers because my cooker is actually under recreational fire. So I just don't want the cops being called on me again when I start to cook because they're calling it a smoker, and that they're saying I have to be 50 feet from both sides property lines. So if there could be maybe an amendment saying that if my neighbor's okay with it, or I mean, I'm at this point, I'm not really sure what to do so that this lady doesn't keep calling on me. So I guess that's kind of all I got. I know Dave emailed me back. That was great, but I heard nothing else from other emails I sent out. So let's just kind of leave it at that, and maybe she's not complaining anymore. I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Allen. Dave, did you want to take a minute or two to talk about the ordinance and the response and the smoker definition, just very briefly, and then maybe we could follow up?
All I could really say is that I did, as Mr. Allen noted, send him a communication by email in January after the last meeting, just to kind of provide some thoughts for the consideration on proceeding. I think Mr. Allen is correct that we do not define smokers in the ordinance. I think the intention of the regulation is fairly well known, though, in the sense, at least by law enforcement, in that we know that the application is for residential smokers to have a 50-foot setback from the adjacent property line. I think there is a valid point to be made that at least in his case and Mr. Allen's case, there would not be, and many other properties around the township, a place that is compliant with our ordinance where you could have a residential smoker and not run into these kinds of potential outcomes. So, something the board could consider if you wanted to pursue an amendment would be to do as Mr. Allen has requested, which is provide for a mechanism for adjacent property owners to agree or to give permission for an encroachment in that setback area. And in that case, if one property owner were on that abutted and another property were willing to give that permission, perhaps that individual can have their smoker within that setback and still respect that 50-foot delineate or that 50-foot setback from the other property where the property owner may not want, to be near that kind of operation. So, I think there's ways that you could approach it. The definition of smokers is something we should address, I think, with an ordinance amendment, and perhaps also if the board were interested in taking a look at expanding those allowances a little bit to be, considerate of those properties that would not be able to meet the current regulations as they're ordained.
Hey, Tara, yes.
Can I just ask a question? Because I heard Mr. Allen, you said they keep giving you issues, and I wasn't sure were you referring to your neighbors or the police. I really wasn't sure which one you were referring to.
The police just comes out and kind of enforces what they're told to enforce, which is now this new ordinance. Before, when they came out, there was no ordinance, and they just wanted to be sure I wasn't burning trash, and I wasn't. I was barbecuing. So the issue is my neighbor is vegan, and she doesn't like the smell of meat. And this is where this in the past 2 years, we have now ended up here, where I have to come to these board meetings because now there's an ordinance against it. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And thanks, Dave, for that synopsis. I did notice you talked specifically about residential smokers. And I remember when we were talking about this ordinance, one of the difficulties that we wrestled with was the failure to define, not on our part, but on others, a difference between a residential and commercial. So yeah, that'd be interesting to see if that's, obviously the definition is very important. So it'd be interesting to see if that's evolved since that time that we spoke of that ordinance. Okay, thank you for discussing that, and I'm sure we will talk about it more. Mr. Tom Keel.
Hey, thanks for letting me speak. Good to be with all you tonight. I'm just coming up to let you folks know that in 2017, Pennsylvania passed what's known as Libre's Law, which was to a massive update to humane treatment of animals. And that has led to some problems in, regulating and enforcing that law. Center County was lucky enough to have we had a volunteer dog warden who was not getting paid, who was taking on a lot of humane cases. And he had a lot of things on his plate to do. However, due to some family issues, he has stepped back immediately. So we don't really have a dog warden in the center region, which that can create a lot of headaches for, people who are caring about animals and want to raise any violations of the law. So I just wanted to bring that to y'all's attention, and so that way maybe it could be, maybe that's something to go to COG, maybe it's something to go to the countywide, but just something to be aware of. And I just wanted to pass that information along to y'all.
Thank you, Pastor Paul. Is warden enforce? He was a volunteer, but an enforcement officer then? Is that just a brief question to Dave? Do you know?
The humane officer, he was a volunteer. He was trained in law enforcement. and he was trained also in the humane officer aspect of it. But he was fully volunteer. He was doing it completely of his own, he was like, this needs to be done, and he was doing it.
Thanks. But did you call him the dog warden? And Dave, is that, I'm sorry. Sorry if I.
Dog warden's different, apparently. My brain was.
Oh, okay.
humane
No, I'm
officer.
sorry. I just wondered, yeah. if that was
Yeah,
your-
I'm not certain whether that was a sworn position or not. I mean, it could be a sworn position, meaning that the individual could do enforcement without it being necessarily a paid position. But I don't know whether that's the case. I can check, see what Chief Albright might know.
Well, it's always good to follow up on these things. I think that would be at the county level. That I know we also don't have a county facility for animals that other counties have, but that's the end of my knowledge on that. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Dave. Okay. Anyone else? All right. Seeing none. Let's go ahead and move on to the approval. We have no minutes to approve. Let's go ahead, and we have no authority, board, and commission reports. So next up is special reports, and the only special report we have tonight is Dave Probalka giving the COVID-19 local response report.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll keep my report brief. There's been no operational changes in the township since my last update. All meeting restrictions and staff assignments remain as they were reported before. And we do currently have several staff who are either out with COVID-19 or suspicion of COVID-19 exposure. As of this time, there are no significant impacts to operations, but if that changes, we'll be sure to communicate those specifics using our traditional and social media outlets. In Center County, the numbers, there are 33,419 confirmed COVID-19 cases in total, with 321 deaths. There are 85,419 negative cases as of today on the PA COVID-19 dashboard in Center County. Across the Commonwealth, the number of confirmed positive cases reached 2,211,784, with 40,836 deaths. Second, on vaccinations, Center County data shows that 93,018 residents have been fully vaccinated, which is up somewhat from the 92,223 reported on January 18. We continue to move in the right direction. And another 14,039 have received at least one dose. The county's vaccination rate is still a little bit below 60%. We're at 59.4%. Having been fully vaccinated, and 68.4% having received at least one dose. Next, as of February 1st at Mount Nittany Medical Center, there were 45 COVID positive inpatients in their care, ranging in age from 32 to 97. Of the 45 hospitalized with COVID-19, 28 were unvaccinated, and 2 patients are on a ventilator. The 2 variants of concern remain the Omicron and Delta variants in the United States. And again, all Ferguson Township residents are encouraged to sign up and receive the COVID-19 vaccination if they've not already done so. That concludes my report. I know there's been some development just in the last day or two on Pfizer potentially having the authorization to vaccinate children under 5, or applying for emergency authorization to vaccinate children under 5 as early as the end of this month. We'll continue to monitor that and share that information out with our residents if there's been any developments. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, and thank you as always for your patience and understanding as we recover from this crisis.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions for Dave? Seeing none, let's move on to COG and Regional Committee reports. I don't think there would be any questions about the executive committee since we've already had general forum. So let's go ahead and move on to the Solar Power Purchasing Agreement Working Group report, which is found in your agenda. Are there any questions? And thank you for that report, Eric. It's very well done. Okay. No questions. With that, we'll move on to other committee reports. The Spring Creek Watershed Commission report. I do see Mr. Mark Garlicki. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Okay, is here with us. Thank you tonight. Thank you for being here, for your service, and for your report. Anything you'd care to share with us?
Just a few comments, I suppose, and I'll try to be quick. Thank you, though, for electing me to be the volunteer for the Spring Creek Watershed Commission, and I also need to thank Dave for offering it to me and allowing me to join the group. It is my first time with the group. So I'm fairly new at this, but basically it was a good meeting. We went through the reorganization for the top of the year, right? And then we had an educational topic, which was the per and polyfluorinated substances. You might have heard of PFAS. I don't know that it's in the report that we wrote. Kevin Abbey is my alternate, but I will mention that Penn State and State College Borough Water Authority were non-detect in PFAS chemical. And it's a synthetic chemical that's used in stain-resistant clothing and furniture, non-stick surfaces, also used highly in firefighting foam. So it does get into the environment, but it doesn't break down in the environment. It lasts for a really long time and has bad health effects, right? So it could be cancer, damage to the liver, some immune system issues. And that's why we got to be careful of how we introduce this chemical. Right now, it has been detected in Spring Creek Watershed, mostly out toward the airport area, in a Benner Township well, but it is in the surface water in Spring Creek and in Bald Eagle. Not real high levels, but they are being monitored. The other thing that's being monitored is the aquatic life taking those chemicals up and what impact that might have. That's a future study that's going to be occurring. So just a little blurb on that. The other thing that the commission is doing is working on a 50-year roadmap for the use and management and protection of Spring Creek watershed. 2 phases are complete of that report already. I don't have access to that yet, but I hope to get that soon. The 3rd phase will be more work, more water quality testing, and possibly an interactive map that allows people around the community to learn more about the watershed. And when there's awareness and knowledge of the watershed, then it's more easily protected, right? So the only other thing I'll mention, there's a meeting in May. It's a Groundwater Symposium. I imagine some of the commission members are going to be in attendance for that, and we can give an update on that at the appropriate time. That's all I have, folks. So I appreciate it. If there's any questions, I can answer them now.
Thanks for your report and the highlights. I see Hillary has her hand up. Hillary.
Hi, it's so nice to meet you, Mark. Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
Just a really quick question, and totally understand if you don't have the answer to this yet. Do you happen to have a date for that Groundwater Symposium in May?
Well, it is slated for May 5th. And that was the, I don't know if that's an estimated date or like where it's scheduled now. I don't know if there's going to be a possible shift in that, but May 5th, 2022. And I'm not even sure where it's at or anything more about it. But once I find out, I can surely let you know.
Great. Thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks. Also a good time, I think, to mention that isn't the Spring Creek Watershed Cleanup Day coming up maybe in April? I don't know if they still have been doing that through the pandemic, but I know Pine Grove Mills wanted to participate, Slab Cabin runs through there. So Mark, I just wondered, that information is really important. Do you have any thoughts on, I mean, not right now, but on maybe how we could further help residents understand, important things that are going on, important topics that you're talking about in the Watershed Commission. I know they do a lot of education there, and I don't know if everybody really takes full advantage of that in the community. So it's just something to think about for the future, maybe not tonight, but it's always something we're interested in making more connections. So.
Great. I will check on that, see if they're still doing it. In fact, Kevin Abbey, he was with the
right.
corporation,
Sure.
So he used to run that whole program. I can ask him if they're continuing that or not.
Great. That's great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. All right, so let's move on to staff reports. Dave, you're up, manager's report.
Thank you very much. So my report is in your packet. It's mostly just on committees that had met, really conducting reorganizational meetings and generally defining their scopes of work for the upcoming year. So that includes both the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan Advisory Committee and the Park and Recreation Committee. Tomorrow is a meeting of the Ferguson Township Industrial and Commercial Development Authority, which will mostly just be the reorganizational meeting and appointments of the officer roles and executive secretary. There's of note or of particular interest, there's a communication received back from Center Region Park and Recreation Director Pam Salakangas in response to the board's request to receive monthly revenue reporting on the township revenue generated for parks programming, pavilion reservations, etc. It seems that they are moving forward with providing quarterly data because of the manual nature of the report. The director has asked whether we would be okay with those reports coming at each of the 4 quarters annually. There's also some work being done to compile the data from 2020 and 2021 as well. And as soon as we have that, which is expected in the spring, we will share that out with the board as well. That concludes my report, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Dave. Oh, let's see, am I muted? No, okay. Sorry, I lost my window there for a second. Thank you for that report. Any questions? I have a quick question about the communication. So was your understanding that the 2 years of historical data, that was something that the agency was going to have for the spring, or only if they just had heard back from us that would be helpful? I wasn't sure from the communication. Thanks.
We'll reach back out and kind of reinforce that, yes, we do in fact want that data so that they can start work on compiling it. It was a little bit open-ended in the communication, but we'll make sure to communicate back with to let Pam know that the board is interested in that, and if their staff could put something together to report back in the spring, that'd be appreciated.
Dave, I think it would be especially helpful in this time where we're working on our rec, park, and open space plan. So thank you much. Any other questions for Dave? Okay. Any other questions for any staff reports at all? All right. Let's go to unfinished business. First up is the project status on the Ferguson Township Strategic Plan Update discussion. Peter Milan with Polity Inc. Is here, I believe. Yep. Hi, Peter. Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you. Hello. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you to the Board of Supervisors for allowing me to speak this evening. My colleague, Stephen Narowski, is on the line too. And we're going to kind of keep this brief and just kind of go over where we're at with the plan and where we see the plan kind of progressing in its final stages. I did send everyone a copy of the plan. And I kind of just wanted to open up for general discussion about, did anyone have any specific questions, concerns that you want to address now before we kind of just get into a very quick synopsis, where we're going with this? No,
Looks like you can dive right in. Thank you.
that's pretty impressive. Thank you. So we made some great improvements to the plan from 2017. We've had some very positive discussions with staff. We have 2 more discussions that are scheduled to complete within the next probably 10 days. And then after that, we're just going to finalize a plan. Both Steve and I have worked pretty diligently on adding some more content to it. And we feel that the plan that we're going to produce for the March deadline will be very advantageous to the Board of Supervisors and your administration. One thing I did want to add was we reopened the survey and we did get a few more responses. So we're going to be adding that data to the finalized plan. We're just going to keep it open because I think as people kind of see if it's out there, they visit it and they kind of complete it. So instead of just having a hard date to close it, we're going to just keep it open. And then whatever we have in the last day, we'll just add it to the final plan then. So I'll leave that. Any questions from supervisors? Dave, Centuries, staff?
Let's open it up to some discussion. Lisa?
Sure.
Thanks, Peter.
I don't actually need to start. I'm still looking for my Word.
Oh.
I think I'm gonna.
No problem. Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah.
Can I just, does Lisa want me to send it to her now?
I'm sorry, what
Peter,
was
if
that?
you had something, go ahead.
Lisa, do you want me to send it? Would you like me to send you a copy of it real quick?
No, I was just looking for my own notes. I have.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Amidst my multiple screens here, but I
I'm
got
sorry.
it.
Okay.
But let me let Tiara go ahead.
Okay, sounds good. Tiara.
Yes, just looking at, 2017 and some of the things that we proposed, I think that some of the terminology with like diversity is very like vague and ambiguous. And I'm just wondering if we could really dive deeper into not only just saying that the township is equitable, but what are we going to do to increase diversity, to increase inclusion within the township, within staffing, within all of that. And so I think that just looking at that more, I think, and I'll be willing to speak to whomever and look at that as well. But I just think that the terminology is just a little bland and dated, almost like it's just there just to say that we have it there versus actually, doing something with it. So that's my only thing.
Would you like to give me a call or email me tomorrow to discuss it further?
That's fine with me.
Excellent.
Here, I can't chat you, but you have my number, right?
I have your email address. I'll send you an email tomorrow. We'll discuss something.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Others? Lisa?
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Peter. Just a few questions. I guess the first are kind of on the formatting and what all was included as far as narratives and summaries of the public meetings. Well, is all of that expected to be included, or is that just for?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. I think it was a lot. That was just my opinion. So I think it was a lot of text on that. And so I don't know if we can maybe be more concise with some of those things. And I didn't see, and I very well could have missed it. If you had the numbers of attendees for the meetings and the numbers for responses to the surveys.
I do. Yep.
Okay. Were they, if they were in there, I didn't see them. So I think my opinion would be it's important to include those things so we know what weight to give all of that information.
Sure.
So that, and then digging into it a little bit, some of the goals that were listed I'm wondering how those were brought out. So were those things that you took from our discussion and the public meetings, or are those things that you are reworking from the previous plans?
I think it's a combination of both, actually. I took a lot of input from the meetings, the surveys. I did review the 2017 plan also, and I kind of wanted to integrate some of that so that everyone kind of knew where we were going with the projection of the new plan. A lot of it is from my information, my input with Stephen, but a lot of it really has to do with interviews and discussions with residents and staff, and also our interviews with you personally and your colleagues.
Okay. I think we probably need maybe a different time to go over all of those things specifically. I found some contradicting each other, and also in the narrative, there were just things that didn't quite follow along or flow. And so, I'd hate to not go through those kind of specifically with you before it's in a final draft. So, so that I suppose is something we could consider maybe putting on another meeting agenda, or having, a separate time to really, dig in on those specifics of the of those goals. And one specifically that I wanted to just discuss for a minute was the public safety component, and I guess where that came from. There was a specific
public safety is more or less my brainchild. A lot of it, I kind of have a very intricate detail about how public safety is kind of evolving for the next 5 or 10 years within the Commonwealth. So a lot of that really is my own vernacular.
Okay. I get that. And I understood what you were saying in that section. I think it's maybe not fully geared toward how it works here.
Sure.
Specifically with, there was some discussion. I understand that volunteerism is down everywhere, but there were some specific notes toward, this being a really acute problem. And that's not the impression I've gotten from Alpha, but that's kind of how it reads in the narrative there. So I think we need to work on that, because that is a regional part of our public safety services. So I find it difficult to lump those things in one area. And then it called out developing a public safety department. And I have some difficulty with that concept too. So I guess I was just struggling with that section.
I think it was committee though, not department.
Okay.
I think it was committee. I can double check it. I could use the wrong word. I thought it was committee though.
Okay. And even with that, we have a lot of other proposed committees or, ideas floating around, and we struggle with, again, getting people to volunteer for those things. So I'm not sure that I would put as a goal. So, but I want to have the opportunity to discuss those things. I think now that it's fleshed out a bit more, if the board could go back with you, and I don't know if this is an email to you on these specific goals, or how the chair would want to manage that input or that discussion. But, I know I, for one, would like to give feedback on the specifics of that.
No problem. Absolutely.
Thanks, Lisa. Others? I have a couple, Bill.
Thank you. I'm getting quicker with my mouse. Question, is there going to be an opportunity for the public to have the opportunity to review the plan before it is adopted, other than just the typical public hearing access? Are we going to see it before any adoption is made, so that public comment can become part of the final adoption?
Thanks, Bill. So first question, Peter, could you talk a little bit about timeline to finish line?
I mean, right now, we're just working on just kind of adding some final content. Our agreement was that you would have this by March. I have to confirm the date, but I forget, it was sometime, I think March. Actually, no, I think it's March 22nd. I think is your final deliverable. I can double check though. So, but I think it is in March, definitely in March.
So I think we have 3 meetings between now and then that are regular meetings.
Okay.
So 3 regular meetings, and currently no work sessions, but perhaps theoretically could have a work session next month. So there's no other engagements planned specifically around the strategic plan.
There can be if you'd like. I mean, I don't mind making the drive out if that's something that you're interested in me doing. I have no problem with that.
I wasn't actually thinking face to face, but
okay.
But I don't know what others were thinking. Lisa, do you have any thoughts on input? You were talking about input, and then I'll go to my questions, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts would be either another agenda item that we can do remotely like this. You wouldn't need to come, but where we work through those goals and make sure they're very relevant now, and they're not, just a retooling of what we had in the past. Because I think what you got too from our work session that day at Pine Grove Hall was, so much has changed, and I want that captured. And I think to go through, and we use the term cross-offable to make these goals cross-offable and important to the board and residents. So I think that second view of those things following this one, to go through and really nail down those specific goals, could be done, like you said, at a work session or in another agenda meeting. Maybe that's a half-hour discussion, I'm not sure. But if we want to submit comments, I don't know if that's allowable, if we can all submit our input on the different goals that are there and use suggestions and have Peter work those in and then bring that back. I'm not sure if that's something we're permitted to do, or if that just takes a lot more of Peter's time to see everything in writing first from each of us and then rehash it in a public discussion.
Yeah, so my questions or thoughts, I'll jump to that and then we'll kind of try to wrap it up with some thoughts to move forward. I agree with everything that's been said, whether it's stated or in question form. I like the provision of the link to the 2014 plan, because I think that even though the goals of the newer plan, the 2017 that we were working on at Pine Grove Hall, even though those goals are more appropriate as we evolve them and modernize them, the cross-offable nature of the 2014 plan, I think, is what we want to try to get to. And the idea of the supervisors and the public providing that list of things that are check-offable. For example, I know the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Planning Advisory Committee would definitely have items to add under municipal identity, like buying flags for the streetlights. Something that we've been working on for years now, or some sort of decor for the streetlights. Probably not just in Pine Grove Mills, but other municipal identity. Other areas would want to maybe try to do something with municipal identity. So I think the idea of what's missing is what's the bulk of the plan that gives staff direction on how this board wants to implement the goals that we've stated. And so I'll leave that for a second and then just mention, I apologize because I had meant to send after our session at Pine Grove Hall. I had meant to send a follow-up email because I thought what we had decided at that time was that public safety item that you had there, I actually had that under a larger goal that is more broadly defined, which is be an inclusive, resilient, it's kind of wordy, but be an inclusive, resilient, safe, diverse, and welcoming community. And then under that, there could be, you know, different public safety goals. That's kind of how I was thinking about it. But I think I just want to highlight something Tiara said, how we handled things in the past. Maybe we were going to call this out in a goal in and of itself. Kind of thought that's where we're heading last session. So, okay, so I've talked enough and I see Hillary's hand is up. Hillary.
Kira's hand was up first.
I'm sorry, gosh.
I might have to change it back
I'm
to
sorry.
the yellow hand if I can't see
I'm
it.
also has trouble with my vision. So it's, you know, it's not you, it's me.
Nope.
I'm sorry, please. Yes.
No problem. Yes to what you just said at the end. But my question to Peter is, what happens if we don't meet this March deadline? I know you said that you were pushing to put this out in March, and it just seems like with Lisa's questions, with my questions, with Laura's questions, I'm just wondering, like, what happens if we don't meet that deadline for the strategic plan, or is that not even an option?
I mean, to be very honest, I mean, it's a contractual issue. I mean, if the board wants to give me more time to complete other details, then I think it's a different discussion then. I mean, we you know, I submitted a proposal and the timeline was approved by the board. So if this is something that you guys are very open to discussing, then I think we'd have to have a separate discussion with the administration on how you want to kind of foresee this progressing then. But again, it's all contractual at this point. I mean, if the board wants other initiatives and other things added, I think we'd have to have just a separate discussion.
And is that deadline March 1st or 31st?
I'd have to look. I apologize.
Okay.
I think it's March 22nd, but don't.
22nd.
I mean,
Okay.
but again, I don't have the contract in front of me, but I think it's March. It's March something.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You and Hillary.
Hi, Peter. Thank you so much for joining us and talking us through all of this. I did not get to meet you in December. It was before we were sworn in, Tiara and I was out of state for work. I would really love the opportunity to be able to speak with you either tomorrow or sometime on Friday if you have time, just to be able to kind of walk through my own questions with this. I think particularly in terms of public safety as well as municipal identity, because I certainly have questions about that and I would love to get your feedback.
Sure, that'd be great.
And Peter, maybe there is, like kind of what Laura was saying, maybe there are sections where we could indulge and dive deeper into diversity without making it as anything separate. But I just think that there are places where we could do more, if that makes sense.
I'd be open to hear your suggestions.
Okay, so moving forward, it sounds like the board, I'm hearing that the board would like to have another conversation there where the public can provide input. In addition to individuals. Dave, could you talk a little bit about your thoughts on how, you know, apart from the contract, how the process would move forward in terms of the township adopting and all of that, whatnot?
Yeah, so typically we would do this by resolution. I think Mr. Keogh brings up a valid point about perhaps developing these goals and then providing an opportunity for the public to inspect the draft document with some notice prior to the public hearing. So, you know, just thinking out loud and, you know, how we may want to proceed if the board were to either talk about this at a future regular meeting or schedule a work session to start to bring those goals together and gel them a bit. Once those are done, I would suggest you receive those and have some discussion at a future regular meeting. And then as the draft starts to take shape, we can make that available for inspection on the website, publish it or publicize it through our social media, make it available for inspection at the office. And, you know, for whatever period you think is appropriate, 2 weeks, a month, however long you think it should be inspected, then we can schedule the public hearing and the resolution and adoption after that. I think Peter's point is something that we would have to look at administratively, whether a contract addendum or some kind of an extension were warranted. We would have to work that out, and that can be accommodated fairly easily. So I don't have any concerns about that. So maybe the board would want to discuss how you wanted to, either now or at a future meeting, how you want to proceed with bringing those goals together and developing a document that we can draft up and have out there in the public.
So if I could just add to what Dave is saying, how about if I offer this for the, will you be meeting on February 15th?
Yes.
So I think by then, I would think by the beginning of next week, we should have all the interviews completed with the administration, with department heads. Obviously, one thing to consider is that, if we keep, adding things to the plan, we have more discussions, it's going to take more time to kind of compile it, produce it, analyze it, and then add it to the plan. So I think what I'm going to propose is this. Why don't we try to have the draft done by the 15th so you guys can mark it up then. We'll have a completed draft for the administration, for the supervisors, for the February 15th meeting, and then you guys can mark it up then, if that's okay.
That sounds good. I see heads nodding yes, so thank you.
Okay.
Great.
In the meantime, Madam Chairwoman, we'll have discussions with the supervisors and whoever else wants to discuss things with us. But I will not, I won't wait. We'll get it done quicker than waiting as long without, delaying the project.
That's great. Thanks.
If there's a delay, I'll discuss it with the administration and then we'll figure something out.
Dave, I have one comment or thought for you. So you probably remember in our budget sessions last year, I had commented on how the budget really corresponded to the supervisor's policy agenda, and I appreciated that. And I thought it really showed a good knowledge of staff as to what direction the board was taking. So I just wonder, I'm not trying to put any work off on staff, but when I think of who could provide a list of check-offable things, the first thought is the department heads, that they could tell me what I've been saying, in terms of items that correspond to our goals that haven't been taken care of or whatever. So I don't know if there's, the ability to infuse that into what Peter's doing by February 15th, but I think it would be helpful for us to know those things if they have thoughts on them.
Yeah, I think once we have the goals generally defined, then the township's leadership team could certainly start to put a little more substance to those by either just presenting or suggesting objectives or action steps that may accompany each. And then we can try to get those ready before I guess as best we can, fit them in to try to get them ready to be presented along with the draft. And
yeah, there's really no time. It would involve, whatever interview process is finishing up, any kind of details like that. So I just had one other thought on this and it's gone, but that's okay. Okay, thank you so much. And Peter, I guess will we see you and Stephen back here then, or we'll just see the draft at that time?
I mean, we'll make ourselves available, obviously. I mean, it's not I won't just give it to you and kind of leave it to you. I'm not sure if you want to have an open discussion that night, or you just want to have it by that day, and then we'll have discussion afterwards. I mean, it's really whatever your pleasure is. We serve the pleasure of the board. So
Thanks. Well, we'll try to get things to you and hopefully have a good discussion that night with the public that might want to attend and give any input. So thank you. Oh, sorry, everybody. I remember what my question was. Dave, so quick question about the goal, right? Directing staff and how they think about items that correspond to goals. So if that diversity and inclusion was a separate goal, would it change kind of the way people conceptualize it in staff, or is it just like having it in each goal would achieve the same goal? Boy, said goal a lot there. Do you understand what I'm getting at with that?
I think so.
Does having a separate goal make it a bigger priority? That's what I'm saying, I think.
Yeah, I think it could. I mean, I think if it were a specific DEI focused goal, then we would just ensure that vision or some of those action steps and strategies kind of imbue all of what we do here, whether it be employment or policy directives or community engagement. We would just kind of fit that in. So if it is a broader thematic category that isn't something specific, like we want to pursue diversity initiatives in hiring, for example, if it transcends the specific initiatives, then it probably ought to be its own independent goal. And we would just kind of recognize that as something that is a part of the DNA of kind of what we try to achieve here and working in concert with the other goals that are established.
Thanks, Dave. Mm-hmm. I'm having a moment where I'm going to miss you, Dave. Okay, Tiara, I see your hand went up.
So does that mean, Dave, that if we wanted to do that as a board, do we vote to do that? And then would Peter then come? How does that work?
I think at this point, Peter, I mean, I don't want to speak for Peter, he's here, but probably there's been enough discussion and direction that we can work together in gelling a cogent goal out of that, and then have that presented for the board to discuss and consider along with the other goals and objectives that are defined. So I think we're okay. I don't think there has to be anything formal that comes out of this. Perhaps your conversation with Peter will help to inform how that goal comes together, and then we can have discussion with the board at a future meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right, everybody feel good about moving on? Stephen, I saw your hand was up. Do you feel satisfied?
Well, excuse me, I didn't want to speak out of turn as David was responding, but my thoughts on including anything with regard to diversity or inclusion. My concern is when you create a separate goal for something like that, it almost becomes something separate. Whereas if it were interwoven with the rest of the goals where it made sense or were applicable, it becomes part of the culture and the DNA of the plan, as opposed to just like a separate section. And I just, those are my thoughts with regard to those type of topics.
Thanks, Stephen. All right, so we have some things to work out and some work to do, and we'll see everybody back here to have a continuing discussion and hopefully be able to get a nice draft ready to move to the next step at our next meeting, February 15th. With that, we'll move on to the Cherry Lane and Martin Street multi-way stop study summary and recommendation. And this will be introduced by Director of Public Works, Dave Modricker. Hi, Dave.
Good evening. Staff, the township engineer with assistance, conducted a multi-way stop study for the intersection of Cherry Lane and Martin Street. This was at the request of the board, which was at the request of the school district radio park administration, which was probably at the request of some concerned citizens. And just as a reminder, we do these studies for multi-way stops, as well as any regulatory traffic control device like a stop sign a traffic signal, speed limits, so that there is there's a warrant or a basis for any traffic control devices. And then the board considers that and then passes any appropriate ordinance. And in that manner, installations are enforceable. So the study was conducted the week of August 23rd, when the school and Penn State were in session. The study included a crash analysis, a review of crash history, accidents over the last 5 years, a review of the geometry of the intersection, a review of sight distance to ensure that we could see pulling out, stopping, and to determine if there were any obstructions, a count of pedestrian volumes, and traffic counts that collected data on the volumes of vehicles as well as speed data. That information is all contained in the 30-page report that is provided in your packet. I can go through any of the details that you would like. We also have collected video during that time period, reviewed the video. The data was collected by a consultant that prepared the tabular forms and the attachments that you see in the report. So in summary, the township engineer and I reviewed the report and concur that a multi-way stop is not warranted, and that in fact the intersection is signed appropriately as it currently is. So at that, I could just open it up to any questions. Basically, the board's being asked, I believe, just to accept the report.
Thank you, Dave. And I see Patty's hand is up. Patty.
Thank you. So I just have a question. I am forever perplexed by three-way stop signs. We have one in our neighborhood too, and I don't get it. What's the logic behind having, when you have an intersection that crosses 4 ways, only having stop signs on 3 ways?
We try not to have those instances. So which intersection are you referring to?
Well, the one that is Cherry and Martin, isn't that a 3-way stop?
No, that's it's a 2-way. So Cherry is considered the main street, and so that's free flow, and the stop is on Martin Street and the driveway, because together they're considered the minor approach.
Oh, okay. Well, I find it, I just find it all really confusing. And so thank you. I meant to start by saying thank you for doing the study and the report. But one of the things I did read in the report was it did have the box checked that it showed that some pedestrians were confused at the intersection. And I agree, the sight lines there are great and everything, but there did seem to be pedestrian confusion.
I don't recall. But
I saw one of the boxes seemed to check. I'd have to go find it now. Sorry.
Yeah, pedestrian volumes were collected and the video was reviewed and field observations made. And it seemed that the volumes actually are relatively low. Now, if you're one of those walkers, maybe you think it's high, but the volumes are rather low. And there's a good line of sight on Cherry Lane. And so cars do yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk, as is required by law. One of the things that helps having the stop on Martin is those vehicles that are going south on Martin that want to turn, left to go toward Atherton Street. Mm-hmm. They're forced to stop. And that way that they can more readily check to see if there's a pedestrian in the walkway. as opposed to if that was the free flow condition, then, you know, their line of sight looking off to the angle might not be as good as it is on Cherry, where it's a straight movement.
Right. And I was also wondering too, because some of the, in speaking with the resident that sort of brought this to our attention, he had said that sometimes the traffic flow around the school, depending on release times, maybe the older students get, so I think it's Cherry Lane, but the Cherry Lane that goes past the school, you know, past Martin Drive, doesn't have a stop sign at all. So is that a Ferguson Township thing, or is that a State College Borough thing?
Well, it's in Ferguson Township, the stop, the school property is in the borough, but
Right.
the street itself is in Ferguson Township. And
Oh, okay.
so the through movements are Cherry Lane. So Cherry Lane going east does not stop. Cherry Lane going west does not stop. The stop control is on Martin Street and on the driveway. We did consider and thought quite a bit about different configurations, including a you know, three-way stop with a right turning movement on Cherry, traveling west and going north being permissible. But as you mentioned, it's confusing, and three-way stops are not really advisable. The two-way stop or the four-way stop is more understandable by the motoring public, and that's what we have is a two-way stop. We didn't see a stop condition that would make things safer, better, more easily understood, and a four-way stop is not warranted, so that couldn't be recommended. What we have over the years is we did put the placards on some of the approaches to indicate that the opposing traffic doesn't stop, so people don't think it's a four-way stop. And we did put the pedestrian crossing, and the school district upgraded the ramps recently. So those are things that we have done.
Okay. All right, I just, as a person who doesn't drive, and I sort of consider myself to be a part of traffic flow as a pedestrian, I just would expect that intersection to be a four-way stop, like at every point. And so I confess to being a little disappointed, but I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I knew bringing this in front of the board that people would be disappointed. It's not something I like to do, is to bring your reports to disappoint you. But I also can't really bring you a report and say this warrants something that it doesn't, because that's being disingenuous. And, you know, really, if you ask individual residents that live on a street, they'd probably all want a stop sign on the street. Everybody would like four-way stops, except the people that have to drive through all the time, and then they don't obey the traffic, and that's why we have the studies.
Right.
But you know, at the end of the day, whatever you decide is, I imagine, what we'll do.
Thanks, Dave and Patty. Yeah, I think I don't know if I recall correctly, but isn't part of the issue with this intersection, the flow street is the street that people have to cross to get to the school. So it kind of creates this specific hazard there. Lisa.
Thanks, and that's what I was going to say. Thanks, Dave, for doing the study and bringing it to us, as disappointing as the results are. And I get what you're saying, and it makes sense that the warrants weren't met. And so I think, you know, we need to remind ourselves that this intersection is not just any intersection. It's at the front of an elementary school, and students have to cross that, I might get it wrong, the western crossing of Cherry Lane in order to stay on a sidewalk. There's no, if you look at the pictures that were included in the agenda, and thanks so much for putting those in there, that's helpful. There's no sidewalk along Cherry Lane on the school side. So any walking student or anybody around there needs to cross Cherry Lane where it is unsigned to get to a sidewalk. They also can't cross on the other side at the what would probably be the slower traffic intersection on Cherry Lane because there's no sidewalk on that side. So right there. So it's just, the only option to not cross right there would be to get on the bike path, which I am guessing takes you a quarter mile down the road to cross at Circleville to get to a light. So it's just so, it's really unsatisfactory, I think, to leave it unmarked altogether like this on Cherry Lane. So I'm wondering at this point what our options are. We can keep in mind too that we haven't had a crossing guard apply for the job yet. And this is for the new supervisors too. We've been trying to get a crossing guard there. Nobody's applied. It's a difficult position to fill. And Public Works was wonderful and got the crosswalk painted right as school was starting. So that helped alleviate a lot of concerns. And, but there still is no crossing guard there yet, and that had been approved. And there's also no school zone slow speed limit there that you often see in front of a school when school's letting in and out. So traffic goes 15 miles an hour. That doesn't exist there either. So.
And why is that, Lisa? Do you remember why, or does anybody know why that is?
I want to say PennDOT, but that's a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, I was chuckling. I shouldn't have chuckled, but it is a common theme that traffic studies disappoint us in their results. And frequently we can't do anything about it, but that's not always the case. Sorry, does anyone?
I have to search my memory here, but it may have to do with the number of walkers and whether or not Radio Park considers that a walking school, or if they bus everybody, even though people walk. And so I'd have to check on that in terms of whether or not, the flashing 15 mile an hour speed limit is warranted.
You could be right, Dave. I think it might be PennDOT. I don't know. I could be misspeaking, but I think Ferguson is not considered a walk-in school, and they have the slow speed limit. So that's what's giving me pause there. I'm not sure.
That's my recollection. And if we did look at it again, any flashing lights considered a signal, and it would have to be permitted by PennDOT.
Right. So just to say all these things, that there are multiple additional factors here. It's not just, we'd love to have a four-way stop. It's, really, I think it's, the time to do something is before you've had an incident. And so that's why I would like to see something done. So I guess that's what my question would be then, what type of sign or painting, other signalization, not signalization, but, other signals to drivers and pedestrians, what are our options at this point?
So when you ask what our options are, you're including signing it with a stop sign?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do we still have the option to put the stop signs there, even though they wouldn't be enforceable? And does that exist anywhere else in the township?
The only one that I'm aware of, and I have to go back and check to see if there was a study done behind it or not, is on Devonshire Drive.
Another thoroughfare where people go fast. Do you mean it didn't meet the warrant and you put a stop sign in four-way anyway?
I think we have a four-way stop that's been there for long before my tenure. And I don't recall whether or not that had a study that was completed or if it was just installed.
Is that Devonshire and Brittany, Dave? Is that what's the intersecting street there?
I think
Berkshire. No.
Berkshire.
The next one. I gotta. Oh, look.
Okay, just curious. I didn't know.
So in terms of this, so what is going on here? We had the school administration and some residents, particularly walkers, alert us to this issue. We did take some interventions that we could, which is put a crosswalk and trim some trees. We clearly identified that the walking path to school that people use, they cross there. They've also probably crossed from Atherton. It's not the safest walk in the book. But in this case, it didn't meet the warrant. but I think we still have the option of signing it. We don't necessarily have to decide that tonight. We could talk about it more. Dave Modrick, are there other options that we should think about? Do nothing, sign it, a four-way stop anyway. Is there another alternative?
Well, we talked about the three-way stop, where Martin Street flows free, and the driveway stops. Cherry on the west side going east stops, and Cherry on the east side going toward the school stops except right turn. But if you want everybody to stop because you're concerned about the crosswalk, then that doesn't address your concern either. So, I mean, it sounds to me like I don't have any other suggestions. And I know we've looked at this intersection over the years, many times. I think we've done what we can. Yeah, other than the board saying put stop signs up that aren't warranted.
When you put it like that, Dave. Okay, does anyone else have any thoughts? It's pretty open-ended here. If we don't have any thoughts of doing something, the default is doing nothing in this one. So. Lisa.
Thanks. Also, I had emailed one of the concerned residents, and so I'm not seeing them here. So, but they might have some of those crossers. Those pedestrians may have some input after this meeting tonight.
It's just a shame that we didn't get a crossing guard for there, because that would be just really helpful. We wouldn't have to worry about slowing traffic flow, and we could be, assured that there were safe practices happening. Can we re-advertise that perhaps? Or is that being advertised constantly, or how's that work?
I'll have to check. I believe the advertisement is still up, but it's not actively advertised, meaning we're not putting like regular one ads out or anything like that. So we can take another run at it and see what turns up.
Of the options that you've discussed, I kind of like the idea of the crossing guard, because I think your concern is at specific times of the day and certain times of the year. And, if you put up a four-way stop, that's 24/7 all the time, that you're expecting people to obey that.
Okay, thanks. So let's, can we decide to get a little bit more active about advertising for the crossing guard? Lisa?
I think I saw Tiara's hand up before mine,
Oh.
if she had a question.
Kiara?
Well, I guess it's kind of like in between a crossing guard and a stop sign, which was my suggestion, which would be to put like, I don't know, temporary, not cones, but something to direct it just during those hours. And then, putting it to the side might possibly help. And then I just didn't know like where speed bumps came into this. I don't know if there's speed bumps already on that road. I'm really bad with like trying to visualize the names of these roads as we're talking about them, but I wasn't really sure if speed bumps was even a part of this conversation, but that's all I had. So if Lisa's is more relevant, go ahead.
Well, I could answer.
Good question.
Yeah, because on your first point, I guess something we didn't talk about, we even have them here at the Township Building, is it's a rectangular yellow portable sign, it's about 3 foot tall, and then it has notation about pedestrian crossing in the center of it. And we used to every day drag it out to the center of our driveway and then pull it back. But we have seen those around in some areas. So if the school district wanted to do that, that's a low cost solution. You pull it out, set it in the middle of the road during the times of day, and then you're supposed to pull it back every night.
So maybe in like partnership, we could buy one or two and they could have a person drag them out and pull them back or something like that?
I mean, I think you
Yeah.
still need a crossing guard, but you know what I mean? I think just safety, I just think that's just, I think we do need to have that, but I do think that would solve that issue possibly, you know what I mean? But.
And then the speed bumps, we would typically put in accordance with our traffic calming policy. Although if you wanted to do something different, I'd feel much better about exploring those kind of issues than I would the multi-way stop.
Dave Modricker does not like the multi-way stop, I'm seeing. Yes. Lisa and then Hillary.
I do like the idea of looking into the speed bump, because one of the problems that contributes there is that on Cherry Lane coming from Atherton, people come at such a high rate of speed toward the bottom of that hill. And I think the only reason they slow down is to make that turn. And we can see from the data that people are going over 25 miles an hour most of the time. So I think that's a great idea, as is the temporary signs we can pull in and out. And that was going to be my comment, is working with the school district to have them also advertise for the crossing guard, because they have a wider reach than we would. And so if we can work with them on both this signage and that advertisement, I think that might help.
Hillary.
I was just going to say that I think just in terms of, providing opportunities for folks in the community and like looking at a more like hopefully long-term solution, actively advertising for the crossing guard, whether that's through our own like email listserv or social media platforms, or in partnership with the school. I think that that should be kind of the end goal here. If it's something that we want to like put on next regular meetings agenda to see, just to check in and see like, all right, have we made any sort of progress in terms of like, have we gotten any sort of temporary signage? Have we been coordinating with the school? Like who's going to be taking kind of leadership on this? That might be worth just checking in on next agenda.
Thanks. Maybe we could include that in the manager's report and have a moment to follow up there. Patty.
Yeah, I agree about the public input. It would be nice to get a little more feedback from folks who are actually, walking there, riding their bikes there, etc. And I agree that we might need a little more time. So I'm not sure if the next agenda item would actually give us time, but we should definitely increase the advertisement with the school district and be a little more aggressive on our part. And then maybe come back to it, because I know we also, a lot of people are, because we are still sort of coming out of this pandemic, and there may be a different dynamic, next fall even. So if we just keep this on our radar and get some input or feedback from our neighbors, and definitely do the aggressive advertising for a crossing guard. And I do like the idea of this sign as well.
Great. Ouch. Sorry. Sounds like we have some great ideas. So let's follow up just regularly through the manager's report, and let's follow up, in a bit, a month or two, maybe 2 months, in what we've learned from the school district, what the price is on getting some of those signs. Can they have somebody pull the signs out, kind of get that plan together, more vigorously advertise, and then we'll talk about it later. And folks that are in touch with folks in the community that have their, have an interest in this, can kind of give them that heads up in the meantime. Okay, sounds good. Staff, any questions?
I would just note that we, as far as advertising for the position goes, I mean, we can point it, we could re-advertise and get it back out there. I don't know what active advertisement means, or I guess we'll have to work on maybe some new strategies, but one of the recurring themes that we hear with these positions is that residents are reluctant to commit to what essentially amounts to an employment that they're employed by the township. And that's really the only arrangement that we can accommodate. Folks are happy to volunteer, and maybe they want to do it on certain days or as their schedules allow. And, maybe there might be a desire to have, a handful of them on call and try to work out a rotation. Those solutions are really just not options for us. We need somebody like we have at Ferguson Elementary, somebody that is able to commit to doing it 5 days a week at a certain defined timeline. And there's reasons. I mean, it's not just us being, difficult to work with on this. It's just that this is how the arrangement that has to be, and it's the only way that it will work. So we can't commit to doing something like we've heard from some of the residents there that, well, maybe if we get 3 or 4 and then we can have a rotation, and some days it just doesn't suit our needs there. So that's why these crossing guard positions are really
sorry
tough
to interrupt.
fill.
Could they job share that, Dave? If you had 4 people that want to be employed but not work full time, and they worked on a regular schedule?
And not
like-
really. It's
No.
it really becomes challenging to manage that kind of arrangement. And that's what I've heard consistently from our scheduling sergeant and our police department. So we did have, prior to the current crossing guard that we have out there, we had kind of an alternate. And that would be if that individual were to have called out sick. It actually happened to be his sister. So they're siblings. And she would maybe occasionally step in and do it. But it was, I would say 95% or more of the time, it was, Nevin Coral. And 95% of the time, it's not 100% of the time now, it's Sam Strickland. So it's just the way that we can manage the staff. It would be nice to say, okay, well, we'll do this on a volunteer. We'll have 4 or 5. Just logistically, it becomes very difficult to manage, and we wind up having to sometimes, we have nobody out there. And of course, that's the worst case scenario, is nobody's able to step in. So just having one individual that can do it 5 days a week, perhaps as another person can be a backup as needed, or we can substitute if that individual can't make a day or 2, we can send our officers out there to fill in for them. But it just becomes very difficult to manage if it's anything beyond just one, individual who's employed by the township on a part-time basis.
Thanks, Dave. Well, maybe see what you can come up with creatively about advertising and reaching out to the school district. It seems like an ideal for a parent who's a stay-at-home person. I don't know. Anyway, the other item we didn't talk about following up with is the speed bump idea. Could we have staff just learn if there's any barriers to even thinking about that at the next level? So, what
I could speak to it briefly, in that if we decided not to go through our traffic calming policy process, really we ought to at least get input from the school, because they're the ones that are driving the buses across it all the time. And maybe the folks that live on the street or do business on the street.
So if we wanted to even think about doing that, we would want to go through the traffic calming policy process to provide for input and whatnot.
That's what our policy says. But if you were going to ask me, would I rather put up a 4-way stop or put up a speed bump that didn't follow our guideline? I'd rather do something that didn't follow a guideline than something that didn't follow the standards.
Thank you. Okay, are we good to move on from this? Okay, great. Next up is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, approving a master plan for Songbird Sanctuary Park, introduced by Assistant Township Manager, Ms. Centrise Martin. Hi, Centrise.
Thank you. So provided with the agenda this evening is a copy of a resolution advertised for public hearing approving a master plan for Songbird Sanctuary Park. On January 18th, the board received the pre-final draft of the Songbird Sanctuary Park Master Plan, which describes the master plan with a narrative, as well as the public process, the public involvement process. If this evening the board approves, the plan will be used, or the plan for staff will be to use the funds that are allocated in the 2022 operating budget to begin to integrate into the work plan construction of the Songbird Sanctuary Phase 1 and incorporate the improvements into the capital improvement program budget for Phase 2 and Phase 3. The master plan rendering will be is made part of the resolution and is provided with the agenda. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I'll also note before I end, there was a request at the last meeting to include sustainable sites into the narrative, which has been done, as well as into the resolution.
Thank you so much. And this is a public hearing, so I will first open it up to the public. Should anyone care to comment? All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Do any board members have any? Oh, yes, I see Patty, you have a question, yes, or a comment.
Yeah, sorry. I just had a question, Centuries. One of the things that was listed as a park amenity was a shallow water bowl. Is that something that would just be filled with like rainwater? Is that the, I was wondering, how do you maintain a water bowl?
Right, so that was something that was proposed by the committee, that we had some brief discussion with the township engineers, and we figured we would include that. And as in terms of maintenance, we would have some follow-up discussion, but there would be, we would have natural water that we would be able to get from natural rainfall, but also have it filled as a possible option per future discussion. So that is something yet to be determined, Patty.
Okay.
I'm saying all of that to say that there's a wide range of options that we haven't quite pinned down, but we included it as an amenity because it was actually highly regarded as an amenity that was important as per the guideline priorities and guidelines.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Good question. All right, there is a motion in your agenda. I'll entertain it at this time.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Tiara.
No, I'll let you go, Patty.
Okay, I move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution approving a revised master plan of Songbird Sanctuary Park.
Tiara Williams, second that.
Thank you. All right, any discussion on the motion? All right, thank you so much, staff, for bringing this to a close here, and thanks to the public. And I still do remember that very, very warm outreach event there. It was so warm. But I look forward to enjoying the park, and especially when there is a path through there. So thank you so much. We do have a motion and a second on the table. This will be a roll call vote. And Dave, when you're ready.
I'm ready. This is it. This is my last roll call. This is presented as Resolution 2022-3. Ms. Danini.
Yes.
Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Ms. Strickland.
Yes.
Ms. Williams.
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell.
Yes.
Thank you, Dave. Don't be
Well.
poignant in the meeting. Okay, moving on. Next up is the Anti-Discrimination and Regional Human Relations Commission ordinance discussion. It'll be introduced by Dave Prabalka.
Thank you very much. So there's a lot of information on this in your agenda. There's a lot of history to it, but I'm not going to necessarily recap all the details. But in 2017, the board started conversations about adopting an anti-discrimination ordinance, really with the primary purpose of establishing protections for the LGBTQ population from discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations. It was a gap in protection from the State Human Relations Act, and remains, in fact, a gap in protections from the State Human Relations Act. So local ordinances are allowed to establish those protections, and that was our primary goal in defining this ordinance. Over the years, it's grown into other, and I think commendable purposes, such as providing another avenue for general allegations of discrimination, even those that are protected by the state act, providing another venue for those to be adjudicated, investigated, and ideally resolved. Other parties were involved in this, meaning other municipalities. It was always kind of envisioned as a municipal ordinance and set of regulations. So at the time, we'd been working with Bellefonte Borough and State College Borough. So along with Ferguson Township, we were kind of the three originators of this initiative. Since then, Patton Township has expressed interest in getting involved in a regional human relations commission, and I'll describe that briefly in a moment, as has Millheim Borough in Center County outside the Center region. Bellefonte Borough, I believe, has indicated that they're not going to proceed with an ordinance. We do have Bellefonte Borough Councilwoman Joanne Tosti-Vasey in the audience with us, so I'm not going to speak for Bellefonte Borough on anything specifically in terms of what they plan on doing or why they are going the direction they're headed. But we are still pressing on, and the ordinance which is provided with your agenda is also accompanied by a very draft Human Relations Commission Memorandum of Understanding. And this was developed by State College Borough that kind of early on in our discussions of this, with the intent of establishing a regional commission to adjudicate these complaints as they arise. So in other words, in short, we would provide the protections and the process in the ordinance itself, and then we'd have a separate memorandum of understanding or intergovernmental agreement that would be entered into by whichever parties were interested in proceeding. Right now, it would at least be Ferguson, Patton, Millheim Borough, and State College Borough. And we also have provisions in there that would allow other municipalities to enter as interested. And that would define how the membership of the commission would be addressed, who would make appointments, what their, the terms would be, what their, charge would be, how meetings would be handled, who would pay for the cost to investigate and adjudicate these matters that appear before the commission. All the logistics and the details of that regional HRC, Human Relations Commission, would be defined in that memorandum of understanding or intergovernmental agreement. There remain a few unresolved, or I'll say unresolved, but probably more appropriately just kind of undecided issues that are presented for either discussion tonight or at a future meeting. And I'll just touch on those briefly. One has been the method for establishing the regional HRC. We had talked about the MOU, that's what's provided in your agenda, but there has been some concern about that MOU process from some of the partners. And so it may be more appropriate to adopt by ordinance, which we do for other things like the Water Authority, the University Area Joint Authority, and intergovernmental agreement. The Center Area Cable Consortium, how we do our franchise agreements, is another example of that. So intergovernmental agreements have more traditionally been done through ordinance as opposed to resolution and MOU. That's a small kind of procedural thing that we can certainly navigate with relative ease. But the substance of that ordinance, if we go that route, is something that we're going to have to spend a little more time on. Secondly, I would say the inclusion or exclusion. Right now, the draft excludes, but it's up for board discussion, of course, the provisions that apply to support animals. So this is something that was in earlier iterations or earlier drafts of the ordinance. The solicitors for some of the participating municipalities have suggested that we remove that, or at least the municipalities that were participating at the time. So really the consideration I think that ought to be given for that particular class has to be, what are we trying to achieve and what are the unintended consequences that may emerge? For example, if a landlord were to not allow pets in their apartment complex, and we were to provide this protected class of support animals, it might, in some cases, require that landlord to allow a pet that is different from a service animal. The definitions are in there for your review, but would be different from like a seeing eye dog or something like that. This would just be somebody's, perhaps emotional support animal or to treat anxiety. So there might need to be a little bit more discussion around whether to include that, exclude that, or if you include it, what are the requirements? Does it have to be does there have to be an endorsement of a professional that support animal is warranted and not just going to be some excuse for an individual to, have a pet in an apartment complex. Animal allergies are another consideration, I think, that's applicable to that discussion too. So that's one of the unresolved areas for further conversation. There also is some unresolved discussion pertaining to dual filings. So as I mentioned before, there is the State Human Relations Act, as well as, if we were to adopt this ordinance, the regional HRC. So there's a State Human Relations Commission, and there are allowances in the Human Relations Act for an individual or a complainant to file in both jurisdictions. So the way the ordinance is written right now, the draft in your agenda would permit that dual filing, would obligate the complainant to dual file, and would the timeframes that are applicable would run contiguously. It would run at the same time. And, that would prevent a complainant from exhausting his or her, remedy through the local jurisdiction and then filing at the state and starting that shot clock, if you will, all over again. And potentially somebody who's the subject of a complaint would incur significant legal expenses to adjudicate that matter in both jurisdictions. So at least the managers that are involved in Ferguson and State College, so myself and Tom Fontaine, are suggesting that we include this provision to allow for dual filing, but that we run those timelines at the same time, that we don't allow one to expire and then the second one begin. The makeup of the Human Relations Commissions is still something that we have an opportunity to discuss further. Are there certain professions or industries that we would like represented on that HRC, legal, human resources, et cetera? So we definitely have, I think, a little bit more work to be done with respect to the establishment of that HRC. As it stands right now, State College Borough has an ordinance in place. There's, as Tom Fontaine has said, and some of their councils say, they intend to update it and revise it to address some of the pain points that they've experienced over the years, but are also interested in participating in this regional HRC. And they have a Human Relations Commission established. They don't have frequent complaints. This is kind of an infrequent occurrence, which is a good thing. We don't want these, it's good to hear that these complaints aren't occurring, regularly. Perhaps a regional commission and a regional ordinance would encourage some who might otherwise be reluctant to bring their allegations and complaints forward to come out and start to have those heard and adjudicated and hopefully resolved if they're founded. So it's hard to really say what kind of commitment will be involved on a regional level until we have a little bit of time and experience with this to know what the costs are and what the commitments are from staff. But really, the process is fairly well described in the ordinance for for filing a complaint, having that adjudicated by the HRC, but also having the township manager or designee in this case, because Millheim Borough doesn't have a manager, for example, to conduct the investigation. It's important that the adjudicatory body and the investigator are different. You can't be adjudicating and investigating. So we've addressed that in the draft ordinance. This has been legally reviewed by some of the solicitors, our solicitor, the solicitor at Bellefonte, as well as State College Borough. But it would definitely need a more thorough legal review as we start to address these other outstanding items. So we would be proceeding, from there. I think that covers most of what I really wanted to address. I wanted to give kind of a broad history, but not take up too much time, specifically for Ms. Stevens and Ms. Williams and Ms. Caldwell, who weren't here when we, I think, last discussed this. This has been a saga that's really been going on for some time. I can answer any questions. There's no specific action I'm looking for tonight. But if there are, directions that the board is interested in going, or a consensus that you want to determine or arrive at around some of these issues, I can note those, and then we can kind of proceed in that direction.
Thanks, Dave. Hillary, did you have a question?
Just a couple of comments. Thank you so much all for all the work that's been done on this so far. I just have a couple of language updates I'd like to propose. Looking at section 201, letter J, I would love to see that be the phrase sex reassignment surgery to be adjusted to gender affirming or gender confirming surgery. Sex reassignment is a little bit of an outdated term, and I'd like to be a little bit more inclusive in terms of that. Also, I think there's an opportunity for language to be included for folks who are non-binary and don't fall within a specific gender. And then looking at letter V in the same section, for me, that sentence is just a little bit confusing. And so I'm wondering if there's a way that we can get rid of the and or, and then also include more language to include more of the folks in the LGBTQIA community, including but not limited to pansexual, queer, intersex, asexual, demisexual, just along those lines. Thank you.
Thank you.
I may need to follow up with you on some of those issues. I think I took good notes, but maybe I'll just touch base by email and get all that. Sure.
Totally. Thank you.
Watching the CNET video. Yep. So in terms of following up, a couple things I wanted to point out, question, comment on, and talk about in terms of moving forward. So I think that the last time we talked about this, Patty might have been on the board.
I think so.
Right? Yeah. So this, as you said, has been going on for some time. Tiara, I see your hands up. I'll go to you next. This had been happening. This has been discussed for some time, and it's a regional effort, but it's not going through the COG. So really, that the municipal managers kind of coordinate with each other after getting some direction from their governing bodies. So we've been in this kind of effortful dance for some time, and Dave has been leading the charge on this. So I'm going to reveal that I would very much love for this board to see this across the finish line. It was begun so long ago. So I'll reveal that is what I'd really like to do, but I don't want to push anyone, because I know it's also complicated. It's a complicated thought. There's different parts that work together that I've had a long time to be able to talk about. So what I'd love is if we could talk about a few of the things that Dave has brought up tonight and bring it back on another agenda in a month. And at that time, talk about any final details, and then try to move it to public hearing. And the reason I'm kind of being forward about this thought is because, as I said, we're trying to coordinate this with the rest of the region. They're also having discussions. They're going to be watching our discussion and trying to coordinate with us. And so it's better if we can kind of lay out our process, if we know what our process will be, and we can align around that so others can too, because ultimately we need to pass things that are aligned. They can't say different things if we're working together on this this regional ordinance. So Dave's highlighted a couple topic areas, and we'll go to that next. So first I wanted to take a question or comment from Tiara.
Yeah, I just was gonna say kind of same thing like what Hillary was saying, if possibly I could just talk to Dave to get a better description, I guess you could say, because it is given a basic description of discrimination, but I do think that when we talk about race and ethnicity and maybe even religion, people can be discriminated against within there. And I just want to kind of like make it just a little more clear. That's all.
Okay, that sounds good. So in addition to working individually on some language clarity issues, Dave, let's hit those topic areas. So the board together can at least know what the decision is next time, even if we don't make it tonight. So first, you talked about something that is going to be up to the solicitors. Is it going to be an ordinance or a resolution? Is it going to be an MOU or an intergovernmental agreement? Let the solicitors guide us. Whatever they say we should do is what we should do. That sounds great. So the topic areas, support animals include or don't include, dual filing, yes, allowing dual filing, and will it be concurrent or consecutive? Concurrent.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, right?
Okay, okay. Will they happen at the same time or one after the other? What was the other? I think there was one other thing, Dave.
This support animals, did we touch on that? Dual filing. Those are really the two, the makeup of the Human Relations Commission was the other point that I just wanted to mention. You know, this is probably one of those boards that really should have, ideally, and of course you can't always select who volunteers, but ideally should have some expertise or understanding of human resource law and general administration. So we could.
Should we be having that conversation at a regional level before we adopt something, or can we do that in the implementation phase? I
think that we can handle that in implementation for
okay,
sure.
That's what I thought. Okay, so really it's just the two topics pre-adoption, and that is support animal inclusion question and dual filing. Is the specific question about dual filing the time period, or is there another one embedded in there?
There are a couple of nuances. I mean, I think the time frame for these filings to whether they occur contemporaneously or whether one kind of rolls into the other is one issue. The other matter is who is responsible for dual filing. What I mean by that is, in some cases, in earlier iterations of this ordinance, we'd considered including a provision that would obligate the local commission or the regional commission to dual file on behalf of the complainant. And I think that's something that could still be a discussion point. The State College Borough Ordinance, the third kind of nuance, which we're not recommending, but at least is worth mentioning, would be whether one filing in one jurisdiction should preclude the other. And I'm not recommending that, but that is something that the borough's ordinance had incorporated, at least in its current form, that if you were to file at the local level, you kind of pick which jurisdiction. And there's advantages and disadvantages to a local or regional adjudication versus a state adjudication. You can probably imagine what some of those are. The state being a little bit more bureaucratic probably takes a little bit longer to get through things than we might be a little more costly to the complainant. And these are things that I don't know all the details of. Joanne does, and she's raising her hand. Whenever you wanted to take public comment, I could bring her up.
Where is Joanne? I can't, where is she?
She's off camera, but she's right in front of me.
Is she in the house? Oh, okay.
She's in the house. Yes, she's in the house. Yeah.
I was like, what? I know my eyes are bad. They're not
yeah,
bad.
I tried to think about how I could bring her on screen, but
yeah, this would be a great time to hear from Joanne before we go into any dialogue on those items, which thank you for elaborating. We're all watching the CNET video after that for sure.
Make sure I've got it. Okay, if you want to use that, this way everybody can hear you.
That's so funny. I couldn't see her either. And I kept looking like, where is she on the Zoom?
So you can.
Yes.
Why don't I address the
If she's talking to us, I can't hear her yet, Dave.
Oh, can you speak maybe a little louder?
Can you hear me?
Maybe even pull, you can, yeah, if you wanted to pull your mask down, you could. I guess.
Thanks for coming, Joanne.
I got no Zoom, so I showed up.
Thank you.
In terms of support animals, at the first of all, let me tell you which hat I'm speaking of. This is not as a member of the Bellefonte Borough Council. I chair the Center County Advisory Council to the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. I've been a member of the Advisory Council since 1993 and have been chairing it since 2006. So it has nothing to do with Bellefonte Borough. This is in my other hat. In January, attorney from the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission came to the Center County Advisory Council meeting and held a training on support and service animals. Under federal law, you can make the distinction. Under state law, they are both covered. So at the local level, if we're following the guidelines of the state, you in the ordinance also need to include support animals. It doesn't, and one of the things I heard you saying was that there might be conflicts at times between, say, someone who has an allergy to a dog and it's a dog that is coming in. That is part of the accommodations. If that's an employment situation, both people would need to sit down with the manager and say, here's what I need. The other person says, here's what I need. And you work out some kind of accommodation to meet the needs of each. It may involve moving one person's workstation to a different area. Or if you've got shift work on different schedules. But it's on a case-by-case basis, because you need to accommodate the person with the asthma, and you also need to accommodate the person who needs that support animal or that service animal. I can leave this with you, but this is from the state. It requires businesses to allow support or guide animals in addition to service animals to accompany people with disabilities in all areas of a facility that are open to the public. So I think it's a very simple solution. If you look at the definitions that you have, support animals are listed as a subcategory under service animals in the definition in the local ordinance. You keep it that way and you should be good to go.
Thanks, Joanne. In this current ordinance draft, that's how we've got it. We've got it tiered like that. Great. Okay, thanks.
Okay. When you can exclude the animal, it is only you can't maintain control at all times. In other words, if the animal poses a direct threat to the health or safety of others, the animal may be excluded. Should the animal be removed, however, the staff must offer to meet the needs of the individual without the animal's presence. And they give some kind of examples. The other thing is that some people keep talking about you have to have them licensed or certified or have a doctor's thing. Federal law, true. State law, no way. Some support animals are licensed and certified and carry a identification papers, but this is not a requirement in Pennsylvania. You cannot request medical documentation, special identification cards, or a demonstration of the ability by the animal. If you're uncertain about a support animal, you can ask these two questions. It's sort of like the marital status when you're doing the employment thing. Is the animal required because of a disability? Or what task does the animal perform? You get the answer to those two questions and they seem reasonable, you need to allow them. If it's like, well, I just like having my animal around, that's a pet issue. That is not a disability issue. Those animals can be excluded. So when you're talking about the landlord who is having a pet issue, asking those questions, they have to say, yes, I have a disability. They don't have to say what the disability is, because you can't, that's a HIPAA violation. And you can ask what the pet forms. So for a support or emotional support animal, it's like, well, when I hold them, I calm down and I don't get angry. I don't act out.
And Joanne, just to clarify, when you're saying you can ask, it's whoever's being requested to provide the accommodation could ask that.
Well, yes, right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Not just anyone, just,
No,
yeah,
no, no.
the provider of the accommodation, that's what starts that dialogue.
Right,
That
so-
presentation was very well done, and I appreciate you setting that up.
So this I'll give to you.
Great.
This is the two-pager is from the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. And the more detailed one comes from a state organization called Disability Rights Pennsylvania. And it goes into using service animals in public places and what kind of animals agreeing. And they also talk about the federal difference in the federal and state law, so give you an idea what the differences are.
But if the regional coalition, sorry to interrupt, if I can ask a question, if the regional commission were not to, or the regional ordinance did not cover support animals, but only service animals, would a complainant be able to then file solely with the Commonwealth instead of, if they weren't permitted to file at the regional level? So you'd still have
Yes, but it makes it more cumbersome for the complainant, I think.
cumbersome perhaps, but it's not
And-
something we don't have to say. In other words, what my question is, we wouldn't have to say
Generally.
in the ordinance that we're going to follow the State Human Relations Act only because we're
That would be
clearly
a
providing
question
additional
for the
protection.
Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. I think in general, if the state covers it and you're creating a local ordinance, you need to include what is
Okay.
in the state ordinance.
Okay.
But I can't answer that one
All right,
completely.
that's a good point. Okay.
Carl Somerson can answer that, or this lawyer that came in. You
Well,
remember
I think I personally would like to be inclusive and include that, but let's have some dialogue with the board now on these few points and see if we're able to move this
If you want.
forward
Yeah, you can
and
leave it.
give the rest of the region some idea of what direction we're taking. Again, my thought is I really want to move this forward, and I recognize we're doing this with multiple municipalities. And so everything I say tonight, I'm going to say is tempered by also saying, and whatever we can get agreement on, because I think that the better is the enemy of the good. And I do not want to pick apart little details and then have the entire effort fail across the entire region. So I've got my ideals, and then really if we can just, move this forward and get something in there, that would be great. So there are 2 points we're going to talk about. Support animals, would like to include them along with service animals that we are including, and then the dual filing situation. So I already have an opinion. It's an informed opinion based on the presentation that I would like to include support animals. Do other folks how much dialogue do we need? Are we all somewhat trending in that direction, or do we want to have dialogue? So Patty, I see you shaking her head. Yes. Others?
I don't mean to prolong anything, but I do understand what she's saying when with the state ordinance, we can't request, we can't ask. I just think that when we think about renters and we think about people who might just be coming in, maybe, I don't know, does this include, I mean, this includes all residents. So that would even be including someone who might be using their home, for an Airbnb, maybe, I don't know. And I just think that if no one has to ask me, is my cat my support animal, and no one technically is allowed to ask me if I have a mental disorder due to HIPAA, I feel like I could just get away. I don't know. I'm not trying to say get away with it, but I don't know the words that I'm trying to use to make it appropriate, because I do know that there are people who need their animals and who need that support and who have high levels of anxiety or depression or whatever they have that actually need that. And I'm definitely a proponent for mental health. I'm just not but I'm also a proponent for business owners and some animals, depending on what type of animal, can ruin an apartment. So I don't know. I think I'm on the fence, but.
Okay, thank you. So other thoughts? Larry or Lisa? Any thoughts on this matter?
I'll let Hillary go first if she had thoughts on. I mean, I'm with Tiara. I'm kind of torn. I mean, I have some thoughts, but.
I mean, at least in my experience with the folks that I know who do have support animals in different places, whether or not it's required to to have kind of licensure as to why you might need a support animal. There haven't been any issues. That's just in my experience. And I would hate for, if someone does have a support animal, for them to be turned away on a municipal level from any sort of housing, and then have to try and go through the state to see if there's something that can be rectified. So it might make sense to adopt it at a municipal level, but that's all I got.
Yep. And Lisa, back to you.
So thank you, Hillary. So I figured I would get some new thoughts that would inform my own. So that's helpful. I think my thoughts are a couple. So the animals are not limited to any type of animal. I know it said, you know, dogs are typical, but other animals may be used for either support or service animals. And I'm glad we've separated the two, because I wouldn't want to commingle those. So I guess, you know, I'm relating with the comment on allergies and asthma proximity to an allergen. And so I have that concern. And I wouldn't see that being such an issue with the housing side of this, because those units would be self-contained. And so, you know, you may pass somebody in the hallway if they're walking their support dog or, you know, something else. So you might have some interaction there. I see it more as a conflict potential in an employment situation where it may be very difficult to accommodate both the allergy sufferer and the person bringing the support animal who is aggravating the allergies or asthma. So that's where I would see some conflict, less on the housing side. Although Tiara's point made me wonder how this applies to short-term rentals and the application and enforcement there. And I had one other thought. So I guess I'm thinking too just about the category of animal being someone who may not be comfortable with all animals. So I'm just thinking, you know, how broad is that relevant
So like
species?
My support rat snake, for example.
Yes, that is basically what I'm saying. So, you know, can we limit that part too in some way? And is there the potential to separate out the housing and the employment side? So those were my questions.
Okay, Dave, do you have answers to any of those questions right now on the spot?
Not other than to say, I think they all would necessitate further legal review. I mean, my inclination is that we would not be able to differentiate the kinds of animals in our protection of support animals. It would kind of be an all or nothing. We either include it in the local ordinance and regulate it, or we don't. But I don't know. We'd want to get a little bit more, I guess, legal input on that from our solicitor. On the prospect of separating employment from housing in the protected classes, I would probably have the same response. My inclination would be no, we couldn't do that. If we're covering a protected class, we have to cover it, and we can't say we're going to cover it for housing but not employment, or employment but not housing. But again, it would be something I'd want to get verification from the solicitor on.
Thanks, Dave. And Tiara.
I guess the only other question I have, Dave, real fast is, do you know if we can adopt this at a municipal level with the federal standard of the requirements, you know, having the documentation and stuff like that? Are we allowed to do that? Or we can only adopt it with the state regulations that are put in place?
Interesting question.
Joanne is here shaking her head, but
which way? Yes or no?
Shaking, not nodding.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know whether there's something that, if you wanted to acknowledge her in that, she's here, going to answer it.
Yeah, if she has any comment on that, that'd be great.
I think I can answer that. The issue under federal and state constitutional, federal can set what they have on laws. The state can go even more strict if they want, or expand it, and same thing down at the local level. So the feds say that you can all, they've got some regulations. The state has said, no, we think that we need to have a better law than that. And so the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act has put on these things that you can't do what Tiara just requested. So then we have to take what's at the state level and move it down to the local level. We can either keep it the same as what the state has or make it stronger. That's up to you all.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I have no reason to doubt that, Joanne's point. I think she's been really helpful in us preparing this, but I would still suggest that we get legal input from our counsel on that matter, just to, confirm or add to or augment her position on.
Great, definitely.
And I also think that we have to consider, and I might just be saying this selfishly, but whatever, we do have to also consider certain people might be triggered by dogs and other animals. Like, I've been attacked by a dog. I don't like to be around them. It's not fun. They're not cute to me. They're just not, right? So I just don't like, especially certain breeds. So when I'm in places and people bring their big dogs in the restaurants, like I'm uncomfortable, but I'm not so uncomfortable where I would have a panic attack or an anxiety attack. But we don't know if, I know there's a lot of dog lovers out here. This is a big dog loving area. So I do understand that, but I'm just thinking about other things. And I mean, Laura, I'm nervous about the snakes too. Certain people might have the reptiles as their things, but yeah. So I guess if Dave is saying that we can't specify the animal, I don't know. Okay, I'll stop.
Yep.
I think you're all really starting to contextualize some of the both sides of the issue, and that's really where we've hit a little bit of we come to a little bit of a stalemate from a staff perspective. But we're willing to do whatever the board, consensus is of the board, we can incorporate.
Thanks, Dave. And I'm going to go to Bill, and then we're going to wrap this part of the conversation up and move on to dual filing, and then move on. Bill.
Thank you, Chair. I think this has been a really healthy discussion. And the only thing that I haven't heard mentioned is more on the residential side of our living community. We went through a very somewhat contentious process of allowing chickens. And we started with a chicken ordinance. And when I look at the flying industry, and namely our big TWA, et cetera, they had some real challenges come before them in terms of support animals. I'm concerned that we take a appropriate look at what we allow or don't allow, or want or don't want in our residential areas as well. I mean, I could easily see a lamb, a sheep, a goat being involved in a backyard as being part support animal, and even though it's not it typically belongs on a farm. So I think there is a bigger question here, and there appears to me to be a slippery slope, and there also appears to me to be some unintended consequences. So as you work through that, those kinds of challenges are certainly part of this discussion in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, so all right, I'm going to try to sort of capture what I think maybe the board, where we are at. So Patty, did you want to add any words to your head nod also before I try to do this? And do you still feel head nodish, or have you changed your position?
No, pretty much what everyone said, I agree with. I just, I am in favor of keeping support animals in there. So,
yep.
But I understand
yep,
what Bill's saying, that we may
Yep.
suddenly find ourselves somebody having a duck as their support animal in an apartment building, which then, you might have noise ordinances or something, but it's a lot to think about.
Yeah. So, right. So the conversation has been very helpful. I do recall from the presentation that some of our fears about like ducks and whatnot, like maybe I'm incorrect about this, but I think there had to be some sort of level of appropriateness of the support or service that the animal was providing. That anyway, in the accommodations effort that was explored. Okay, so but to try to capture the will of the board, it looks like we're a bit split, but none of it seems to be, we're very entrenched in either direction maybe. So Hillary, did I read you right as being generally supportive of including support animals?
I'm in favor of including support animals.
Okay. So I think we kind of fall a little bit more towards the including support animals side. But I'm going to again restate, if the rest of the region strongly didn't want to include support animals, I would still want to go ahead with an ordinance that didn't include them. But my preference, and I think the general slight majority of the board, is that we prefer to move in that direction on that.
Okay. So noted.
Okay. The other item is the dual filing. I don't love the idea of preclusion of somebody from filing in a certain manner. So that makes me nervous, and I don't know that I understand it fully. So are you saying that by having a local ordinance that extends rights to a group of people that previously didn't have those rights extended, that we then also, to all of the folks that are protected with this, do we say now you have to pick one or the other process? Is that what that preclusion means?
That's what the State College Borough Ordinance included as one of its provisions. That's not what I'm suggesting, and that's not what the words are. That's not what the verbiage is in the current draft.
Okay, good, because I don't like the idea of that preclusion. I don't know if others have a strong opinion about that, but I'm glad we're moving in a direction that doesn't do that. So speak up now if you prefer to see a change there. Okay, so then the rest of the dual filing question is, do we want to see these processes, if there is dual filing, happen concurrently, or can they happen consecutively? And the thought is, if I'm correct on this, that by allowing them both to happen, but to have them concurrently, then you limit the duration of time that this process is happening, and therefore limit risk for the parties. Is that?
I think that's the intent, yes. And I should note that I believe Joanne had a comment to make when you're taking public comment on this particular issue. And yeah, that's how it's presented, would be that the two timeframes, the statutes of limitations, I guess, and the timeline to investigate and decide on these complaints would run contemporaneously at the same time. And therefore it would ostensibly be, perhaps less burdensome on all parties that are involved, because you would be working, on perhaps in both jurisdictions, resolving or investigating and resolving a matter both at the state and the local or regional level in this case, but that it would not just be this protracted matter of litigation that would continue on for a significant amount of time. There's a long time frame provided in the state HRA, as well as what's being proposed in the Regional Human Relations Act or Anti-Discrimination Ordinance. So that's really the subject of what we're looking for a little bit of direction on.
All right, I already know my position. Let's go to Joanne for her comment on this, and then let's open it up to the board for thoughts on the timing of the dual filing.
I'm going to just stand over here again. That seemed to work pretty well.
Yeah, okay. First of all, I think to try to clarify what the process is at the state level is you have 180 days from the date of the last incident of alleged discrimination to file a complaint with the state. If you look at the ordinance, draft ordinance that you have in your packet, you also have that same 180-day limit. So in terms of continuing on and on, they contemporaneously say it's the same incident, same date, 180 days. There isn't, you start here, it is not the date you filed the complaint. The timing is based on the date of the last incident. However, there is a caveat here. If it's a pattern of discrimination and the person does it, person files a complaint, and then they go back again and do the same thing over or something similar that is the same sort of discrimination, the clock starts all over again. But so it's 180 days from the last incident of the complaint. It is not from when they're filing. So the idea of going from one to another down the road, just odd and finite because of when they filed the case, that's immaterial. The timing is that particular day. In terms of the dual filing and notification section, which is where you're having some of the problems.
Yeah.
In your packet is a memorandum of understanding that was drafted by Carl Summerson from the PHRC. It is based on the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. So that if you're going to work with the state, you need to have an agreement of dual filing. Here's what the law says. In order to avoid duplication of effort, section 12.1E of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act provides that notifications shall be given by the Regional Human Relations Commission and to its individual members of the PHRC. When an individual files a complaint with either the Regional Human Relations Commission or one of its members. It also similarly says that in section 7N that the PHRA will provide the same reciprocity by notifying the regional HRC of complaints received by the PHRC that would also come either under one or the other's jurisdictions. So basically what it's saying is that if you're going to be working with the state, you have to notify them. Putting that burden on the complainant is probably skirts the law at the state level.
Thanks, Joanne, for that clarification. I think that harkens back to what the lawyer was saying when we had that sidebar in the support animal discussion about that. They do the same thing with the feds. It's just an ingrained reciprocity in this type of legislation, it seems. So it sounds like from what Joanne was saying, the areas that she highlighted, Dave, it seems like we, as it is written, we have that reciprocity of the dual filing. We've got that in the documents. No.
So if I may, just a couple, well, first I should note that, and I understand Joanne, appreciate Joanne's position on that. And that's what Carl Summerson has said. I should note that the solicitors may have a different position on that. So there's an interpretation by the lawyer representing the State Human Relations Commission, but there is a alternative opinion, I guess. There's a conflicting opinion that you might hear from our local council. So once again, as was the case for the support animals, I would just encourage that we look to our local council, Betsy Dupuy, as our solicitor for her position on that, and whether that requirement really exists as the way it was described.
But even if the requirement didn't exist, we could choose to do it. And is it written that way now?
It's not written that way now in the ordinance. The MOU, just to clarify, that Joanne is referencing is not in your packet. I've included that in past presentations, but for the purposes of this discussion, to keep it focused, I didn't get into the agreement that would be in place between the regional HRC and the state HRC. But I'm glad she brought up, because that is another component that would have to be worked out and resolved by both parties. But that would be done by MOU, which is a resolution, as opposed to an intergovernmental agreement, which would establish the regional HRC and be done by ordinance. So just more nuances. I mean, if the board says, well, hey, we want to do this dual filing, we want to assume this responsibility, then we'll just write it that way. And But if you say, no, we don't want to take that on, or we want to place that requirement on the complainant to file in one or both jurisdictions, then we'll want to just follow up with our counsel to ensure that it's compliant with the state law.
Okay, so I want to just make sure everybody on the board understands the question before us. So I know what my position is. So the question before us is, will the body assume the responsibility of the dual filing to the other body, which the state, or will we say, no, the complainant has to do that? I know what my position is, so that's part of it. And then the timing of the dual filing. I also know my position on that. So let's go around the room. Let's try to wrap this up. So the position, your position on the timing, if you have one, and your position on the responsibility of the dual filing, if you have one. And it's okay not to have one, just say that. And if you have questions, that's fine too. But let's try to move this forward with some thoughts. Anyone? Patty, and then Hillary.
I guess with the filing, I think I would be leaning that the complainant has to do the dual filing, but I don't, again, I could be tucked into something else if that's what it takes to move it forward. And the timing, that part I'm a little confused on, so I don't have an opinion.
Okay, so the timing, just to review it, then Dave, could you do a quick review of the timing question?
Sure. So I think as Joanne pointed out, when we're talking about the shot clock that starts for a complainant to file, that 180 days from the date of the alleged discrimination, or in the event of recurring discrimination, that's kind of a moving target. That's kind of notwithstanding from this, it's correct. They would both, those timelines would run the same, irrespective of whether we, pointed that out in the ordinance. It's more about the timing of the investigation adjudicatory process. Having, if a complainant files on the same day with both jurisdictions, that those timelines run congruently with, or run at the same time as one another.
But do we have control over the state's timeline? I guess is, now that Joanne
I
has
don't think
talked
so,
about,
but we could clarify in our ordinance. And if you think about a recurring act of discrimination, of course, that in that circumstance, if it's something that's housing or employment related, and that act is taking place daily or regularly over a period of time, would it be the case that a complainant could file with the regional jurisdiction within that 180 days of one of those infractions or discriminatory acts? And then once that avenue is exhausted, could they file with the state and say, well, here's another act that took place? And that, it's really just a matter of clarifying how those timelines advance, not so much that from the date of the alleged discriminatory action, but again, just to reemphasize the adjudication, the timelines that are prescribed to the investigation, to the decision that's communicated back to the complainant, just to clarify that those two timelines in the instance of a dual filing would run at the same time as one another. Joanne does have her hand up again.
Okay, we'll go to Joanne and then back to the board, and yeah, go ahead, Joanne.
I think I sort of understand the confusion. Generally, when you do have a dual filing, there's a decision has made as to which agency is going to handle the case. The other one just sits back. You don't do anything until or after everything is done with the other. But then, and there's an adjudication, there's a decision one way or the other.
Okay. 6 or 8 months down the road, another thing happens again. Person could always file. It's just like any other legal suit. And people can be facetious and multiple times. If it's the exact same thing, you'll probably get kicked out. If it was found to be a case of no probable cause.
So I think the concern that you're having here is that because of the dual finding, the memorandum of understanding that you're going to be putting together with the state, that by having that, the two agencies decide, I'll handle this one, you handle that one, and the other one just sits back. You won't have that conflict I think you were talking about.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'm fine. I'm fine with the complainant filing, but I prefer the agency to file. I think I really think we're working out the timing issue. If there's something to decide, I'm going whatever the region wants. Again, let's do what the region wants, but I don't want to preclude anyone's rights to do anything by trying to do a good thing. So that's where I want to be really careful. Okay, so the rest of the board, thoughts on who files in the dual filing, the complainant or the agency, which would be the Human Relation Commission body. And if there's a timing issue, I guess comment on it. I don't know that there is one, but any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm leaning in favor of the complainant filing. And as long as it's assured that there will be due process, just in terms of timing, I'd be fine with concurrent filings.
Great. Any other comments? Okay, Dave, I'm seeing no other comments. Do you want to reflect back if you have enough to go on, or maybe this is something for more conversation at our next discussion?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this is great. I have some direction from the board. We'll include support animals, and I am kind of the writing I'm reading on the wall from State College Borough, at least, is that they're leaning in the same direction to include that as a protected class, and I would imagine that Patton Township and Millheim Borough would follow suit. As for the timelines, I think Joanne articulated well why perhaps the concerns are unfounded. That admittedly, that's one of the nuances that I understand the least about all this. So I've been, relying on some of the kind of conversations that I've had with some of my peers and the solicitors, but I can do a better job refining that. And if there is an issue, bring it back for more discussion. It sounds like where the board is leaning, at least at the moment, would be, as again, is sort of the requirement that the complainant file with both jurisdictions. I think, part of the, if I'm just remembering some of our past discussions about this, is that if we advise, I think part of the solicitor's positions on this is that if we inform the complainant that there is this other jurisdiction, that would satisfy our legal requirement under the HRA. So I think the State Human Relations Act. So, it's just one of those things that I'll want to, given that this is seems like it's the interest of the board at the time, although it doesn't sound like there'll be a whole lot of heartburn if I come back and say, yeah, you know what, the solicitor said that it has to be the agency that files.
Right.
It seems like we're okay with that too. But let me do a little bit more, digging with the legal counsel on that, and then we'll be ready to present this back. I really do think, although I've said this before, we're rounding third base on this one, and there's just a few kind of procedural items that have to get resolved and legal items that we need to get a little more insight into. But we should be able to wrap those up pretty quickly, and then kind of march in step. If we do go the route of the intergovernmental agreement, we may have to massage some of the language in the ordinance to reflect that. So we'll get that worked out on our end too. Hopefully present that back to the board for further consideration and refinement. It's hard to commit to a timeline, especially with me transitioning to another community, but it will be something that Centrise will take the mantle on, and working with Tom Fontaine and Doug Erickson and Robert Ziegler at Millheim, and kind of getting everybody on the same page is probably the last significant hurdle that remains beyond what we've already talked about tonight. But I think this gives me the info I need, and I just wanted to give you some general background on it. If there's any further questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll keep marching ahead.
Great, that's great. And then if the rest of the region needs us to put this back on the agenda in a month or whatever, we can. If not, then we can just keep chugging along until the point where that next document is ready for us to take a look at. But we were kind of, soft opinion on everything. So if you, as you learn more, if you can just update us, that would be great. And thank you. All right, so let's move on to our new business. First up is the consent agenda. We have 2 items. I'll take a motion to approve the consent.
Oh, sorry. Motion.
That's
to approve the
okay.
consent agenda.
Yep, to approve the consent agenda, and I accept the voucher report, I think.
So moved. This is Patty.
Great. Second?
This is Lisa. I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. All right, next up under new business is the discussion of the Council of Governments Finance Committee priorities. This will be introduced by me. This can take as long or as short of time as we would like. So as indicated in your agenda at our Finance Committee meeting, we reviewed the priorities that came out of this exercise last year. We assessed our progress and were asked to review the priorities again. And you have some attachments in your agenda that highlight them. And so really all I'm looking for, like I said, is as little or as much direction as you'd like to give me. I can, if you would like, go down the priority list and just briefly hit each one, just give a little synopsis, but I'm also certainly more than willing to not do that. So really it's at your pleasure. In lieu of going down through each one, I'll just take general comments. If there's anything in particular that you really want to see highlighted as an important priority, or if there's anything that you think is not at all a priority, that's also fine. Just really wanted to provide an opportunity for board discussion on this matter. So with that, I'm going to immediately open it up to thoughts. And Hillary, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, a couple of things that I'd like to flag and potentially see, represented by Ferguson on a COG level are number 3, discussing potential methods to catalyze private investments for projects approved in the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. I would be interested in the COG completing a fleet management plan and sharing its findings with the Finance Committee. And I think, I don't know how much finance really plays into this. That's something I'd probably need to learn more about, but I would definitely be interested in number 22, improving planning and communication surrounding the requests for studies and seeing if there's a way that we can make that more efficient. That's what I got so far.
Great, just the kind of thing I was looking for. Fantastic. All right, other thoughts? I'm also very supportive of the fleet management plan. Lisa.
Just a quick question on that before my thoughts on that. The fleet management plan, so that wouldn't be related to facilities at all, because I look at that as more associated with that than finance. So that was just, I'm sure there was some discussion about why that lives in finance and not anywhere else in parks or code, or, why that wouldn't just be a compilation of those things, but that's just more of a.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that's kind of one of the, so the COG committees are each a little bit different. Some have like subject areas, and then others kind of overarch the whole organization. I think you can think of finance and facilities both that way. But I think the reason why it's in finance and not facilities is it's an asset, but it's not a facility, is typically how I think we think about that kind of a thing. But that's just a guess. And I certainly can explore that a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. It just seems with the list, there's a lot to take on in the finance committee, but so my big picture thoughts were the items that related to the funding of different capital projects and including the environmental projects and sustainability activities that Hillary just pointed out. I think that should be a priority. And within that, looking at the formulas and assessing those and the relevancy and how they are moving through time, if they're still appropriate. I think, I guess this wasn't such a big thing, but looking at the fund balance policies should kind of be up there if they're considering having creating some policies around that. I don't want township funds restricted until they're needed in most cases. So, if it's going the other direction, then I would absolutely like to see a policy around that. And then just the long-term planning and the use of the CIP, the capital improvement program that we've been talking about with COG and with different agencies and departments, I think is just so important for the municipalities and their planning and budgeting. So the more hands-on that finance can get with that, and encouraging the departments to follow through and be proactive and use that as a tool, and allow the municipalities to use that as a tool is something I'd encourage. And then the last thing I saw kind of a thread throughout was just updating agreements. I'm sure there's many agreements throughout the different things that finance is tied into that could use an update. So I think, that wouldn't be something to get tied up within a year, but to keep that at the forefront as they come up.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you very much. All right. Anyone else care to provide any thoughts? Okay, sounds good. I will also highlight that, yes, I think that the use of the CIP has been a recurring theme last year. I know that Parks Capital took that up as an individual work task that we're going to be working on. And really interestingly, it was sort of like one of those epiphany kind of moments in terms of government structure. We had been talking about this with the authority, and the authority, because we have this very separated, siloed approach to parks, the authority had always thought of the CIP as a COG thing, and they were stepping on our toes to look at the CIP, when really, we would love them to look at the CIP and to give us feedback and to plan. So now they're going to be looking at the CIP. And so, having that conversation, right? So this is the agency that does that capital investment planning. Now they're going to be looking at that CIP as a tool to have a dialogue with us. So I guess that's something I'll highlight. I think it's a really big step that we took as an organization in terms of capital planning. So I'll just highlight that a little bit. And as I said, the fleet management plan, I think we do that here in Ferguson. And I think, those vehicles are a huge asset. That's a great priority. So I will go ahead and work on this worksheet, and I will provide it to COG, and I'll copy you all so you can take a look at it and provide me with any additional feedback before I go in to have that discussion with the other municipalities. Thank you very much. Any final thoughts before we conclude the discussion? Okay, all right then. Next up, we have a consideration of establishing a standing monthly work session, and this will be introduced by Township Supervisor Lisa Strickland. Lisa.
Thank you. So the board has long discussed having a standing monthly work session, and we've even discussed it again this year. Some things that we've thrown around, including on it, could be special reports, ABC reports, and then maybe some major discussion items. I would include maybe the zoning, rewrite discussions that we've been having, or a strategic plan. Those could be items that would be a good fit there, because you're not voting on anything, but they require some deep discussion and some lengthy deliberation. That would be helpful to maybe set aside outside of a regular meeting. So, and I guess this seemed like a good time to bring it up. We were trying to schedule a work session. So it seemed like this still could be a useful tool for us. The benefits of having a regularly scheduled work session it's just predictable, for us, for the public, for staff, and that adds transparency. We know when it's happening. It's pretty time consuming for staff to try to schedule doodle polls for us to have those meetings. And, with this many people plus department heads, it can be kind of tricky. And then it's hard to engage the public when we're having them at different times. And another thing we thought we could do in those sessions would be to use them for executive sessions, should the need arise. Then we have that time allotted, and then we can cancel it if we don't need that extra time 1 month. So those were my thoughts on it. It seemed like it might be helpful for us, for the staff, for the public, to see if there is a regular time during the month that would be fitting to set aside for that, maybe 2-hour block, maybe 1 hour block, and maybe have 1 or 2 special things set aside for that. I'm hesitant because if we choose to cancel a work session, knowing that we have ABC reports there, we'd be less inclined to cancel it. So that would be another point of discussion. But, we have so very many different initiatives happening this year that I don't see a lack of content or issues that would come up. That of course we can always cancel if not needed, but I don't think we need to actually assign something to those. I don't think that needs to be part of it if there's some concern about that. So I'll leave it with that. I just wanted to introduce it and get some thoughts and see where it goes.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I think that's a really good point you're making there about not wanting to schedule something regularly in that work session, so it's much more easily canceled. That's a really good point to think about as we move into discussion. Okay, so thoughts on the concept, Patty?
I think in general, I'm supportive of it. Would it be recorded on CNET or not?
It's a great question. I think that would be up to us as long as we didn't schedule during a conflict for CNET.
Yeah, I would say that, during the day meetings just typically are a little bit more difficult to accommodate with CNET because they've got their interns, I guess, that typically show up kind of later on in the afternoon. They do cover some during the day meetings. It would just be maybe a little bit more difficult for us to fit that into their schedule. So we want to check with Cindy if you schedule it during the workday and there was an interest in CNET coverage.
So to follow up, could it maybe just be a recorded session as opposed to the live, or, do you know what I mean? A taped, I don't know if I'm even using the right word.
Of all their varieties of ways that they can, increase their public.
Yeah, Zoom's introduced kind of a new way to approach these, and they record the Zooms and then they broadcast those. But I would think they'd still have to have a technician on hand, as they do for this meeting, that's able to make sure that there's no issues with the recording, so that they'd still have to have that manual touch point. But I can check on all that.
Thanks, Patty. Tiara.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to, because I know you said that this has been discussed prior to us getting on the board. So I guess my question is this literally just to discuss the ABCs and any additional things, or is the purpose of this to make our regular scheduled meetings shorter? Because we're coming up on 3 hours and I can't imagine going to another session in the middle of the month. So I guess I'm trying to figure out what is this? Is this to offset the time that we're spending on these meetings, or is this just an additional meeting? And if so, I don't know. I see when it can be important. I might be more for bi-monthly in an hour slot, but it's just with all the other meetings that we have, I just feel like it's a lot. It's a lot if this is not going to cut down on what we have going on right now.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thoughts?
I'll comment on that really quick. I think my thought really is it would be, it might take away from some of the bulk of our regular meetings. Like tonight, probably what I would have suggested is moving the strategic plan discussion to that work session, because that's a really hefty item. It requires a lot of deliberation. I think probably when I look at other municipalities meetings, they do run 2-3 hours. So I don't anticipate them running much less than 3 hours. I think that's about, from what I see in other municipalities, I think that's not horrible. There just is a lot going on and a lot that requires a lot of discussion, and I would suggest using it like the borough does too. We can cancel it if needed. It could be a single item agenda for discussion. And, like I said, we just have a lot going on. There's limited staff. So the board is really hands-on and working through things that that either we've introduced or staff has brought forward or that just arise. And so I think we can't get around too much of the time stuff, but breaking it out, I think could be more manageable.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I really definitely am thinking of it as a tool to try to keep our regular meetings moving along and more on point with the agenda timing and getting better at that, kind of predicting it and managing it. And I agree, like the strategic plan, the zoning question, we're going to have the official map discussion may turn into more of a hefty conversation. And I think my biggest drive at this point for this is seeing that there's a lot of staff time taken with doodle polls and trying to find times that fit for us. And that if we could do that just once, put it into our schedules and then remove it as we can, I think for both executive sessions and work sessions, we'd really cut down on staff time and sort of the chaos of scheduling those kind of not last minute, but in a timely manner. So for example, we had that zoning discussion. We said, oh, let's move this to a work session. We still haven't gotten our date for that work session. We, in addition to our own needs for dialogue, there's other processes that happen around us that we need to be able to keep pace with. And so I think that this tool, it will be maybe something that we could use for any of those, for executive session, for work session needs. For example, last year, COG all of a sudden decided they were going to ask for, more $1 million, X million more dollars, and that significant conversations in our regular meetings and we even had to schedule a work session for it. So we have a lot of things come up. So yeah, I'm really thinking about something that is going to make our processes more efficient and then more predictable. So when residents want to contribute, they have a more ability to predict when they can. Hillary.
I mean, at the end of the day, I do think we simply need a separate work session to be able to work through some of this stuff. I mean, it's really hard when these regular meetings run as long as they do, knowing that other municipalities go through the same thing, but particularly I think not only implementing a work session with a strict time limit and a very detailed agenda, potentially introducing some parliamentary rules here, as well as adherence to time limits on the agenda, potentially working, finding other systems of efficiency to ensure that board members are maintaining transparency, but also, streamlining our questions or discussion or things like that. I think that might be worth exploring as well, just so we can make all of this a little bit more more efficient and more respectful of everyone's time. I mean, and like, I know that there's a a big discussion about like, when will this even happen? We had a really hard time trying to find a time for a work session for like the remainder of January or this month. And so if this is something that we need to discuss now, knowing that we have like really important things coming down the pipeline, I feel like we should like all of us like need to pull out our calendars and be like, all right, when are we actually free?
Thanks. Thank you. Okay, so I'm hearing that generally folks would like to schedule a work session. I'm hearing either once a month or once every other month. And I think probably none of us want to put something onto this agenda that would make us not want to cancel it if we had the chance to. So I would say maybe not moving off the reports and whatnot into that work session agenda, because like Lisa said, we're not going to want to cancel it then. Even though sometimes they can take some time, we'll try to keep them on time. Do we want to, as Hillary said, did you suggest like right now doing that, or should we try one or two things and then go to doodle?
I mean, I totally defer to Dave in terms of Dave and Centuries in terms of like trying to wrangle us cats here. Just in terms of like, we've all got a million different things going on in a million different directions. And I want to make sure that not only are we working together as a unit as best as possible as we can, but we're opening ourselves up for the public as well.
Yep. So Dave and Centrise, would you prefer that we try to come to a time right now, or, okay, Dave saying yes? Yeah.
Well,
I mean, within reason.
Just to say that, yeah, I think remember, this is a standing month. So if there's a day that works well for everybody of the week or a specific week out of the month that you know that generally you're available, I can say that if there's a request or if there's an expectation of staff representation there, we're probably looking at the fewest conflicts would be towards the middle of the week, Wednesday or Thursday. If you wanted to do something in like a late afternoon time frame, maybe 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, that's probably ideal from our perspective. But it's probably easiest to have the discussion now as opposed to sending out a doodle to kind of see what's best, or we could figure out another way to approach it.
All right, let's give it a shot. So Wednesdays, let's start with Wednesdays. Dave suggested Wednesdays as being possible. Hillary.
May I suggest the second Wednesday of every month so that it slots in between our first and third, or our regular meetings in the month?
Yeah. Dave, what does second Wednesday look like for the township? And supervisors, what's it look like for you all? I'm also right now, my last meeting I have to schedule with COG is February 9th. We're going to know for sure, but we're trending towards Wednesdays, either at 8:30 a.m. or 12:15. Neither of those should really conflict, but it's just something to keep in mind. Afternoon Wednesdays, second Wednesday. Lisa.
So 1 p.m. to I guess 3 would be blocked out. That's the farmers market steering committee.
Second Wednesday, you're right.
Second Wednesday.
I forgot that was something else.
3.
Yep. Yep.
But 4 would work for me.
So that's a solid wall of meetings right there that day.
So these 4 and 5 o'clocks, they don't really work for me. I'm a single mom. I have to pick up my child. They don't work for me. And quite frankly, I don't really have that many more afternoons or evenings. I could do a lunch, a working lunch, something, but I don't, unless we're really breaking into like a Saturday or a Sunday, I don't think I have any more like afternoons. I'm kind of like you all, everybody has a whole bunch of stuff, but I kind of waited for you know, the HR committees and all of the COG. Like I kind of waited for everything before I stacked, and like I just don't. I don't see it. That's all I can say. I don't know. I don't know if I'll probably have to wait and be like the last one to agree or disagree, because I don't want everyone working around me, but these afternoons and stuff are getting like really stacked and like.
Okay. So Tiara, is like the 3 o'clock time a particularly bad time because of school pickup and whatnot?
Well, I usually pick him up around 4:30-ish, but I have a job. So so a lot of times, our meetings are around like 3:30. Like today I had one at 3:30, right? So I mean, it just depends. I'm looking at the preset things I possibly could do. I mean, I actually have more free time on Fridays. I just don't think people want to meet on Fridays. I just, I think
unfortunately I can't do Fridays until June. After that, I could maybe do Fridays.
So.
What about the second Thursday of every month?
I teach classes on Thursday evenings at 3:50 all the way until 5:15, and then.
But maybe could we meet during the day?
I have on second Thursday, I have finance at 8:30 and I have Parks Capital at 12:15 most second Thursdays. Let's hop back to the second Wednesday again for a second. What about evening of second Wednesday? I know staff would prefer day, but if there are jobs of supervisors that can't accommodate for day, then we'll have to look at evening. What about the second Wednesday at like 6 p.m.?
In terms of my work, particularly as we get closer to the middle of May, that will become increasingly hard for me.
What about fourth Wednesday at 6 p.m.?
I have meetings on Wednesdays with the coalition.
Okay.
I think I was clear when I was elected official that I was an activist, and I've moved a lot of stuff around. So I think that I couldn't.
On Wednesdays, you're saying?
Yeah, my meetings are on Wednesday evenings around 6 and 7. So like I have one this Wednesday, right? So I don't know about that. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Harry.
No, that's okay. I know that there's the COG public safety meeting at 12:15 on the second Tuesdays of every month, and I'm not sure if Tuesdays are less than ideal for staff. Is it possible to look at a Tuesday afternoon? Does that like before school pickups and potentially before any sort of like evening meetings? Like I know the Center Region Anti-Bias Coalition meets then as well. Is there any time that we could slot in there that would work optimally for the board as well as staff and public?
If we do them an hour before township meetings, I mean, I don't know what, like, you mean on the off Tuesdays?
I was gonna say like on the second Tuesdays of every month. So they like stack in between the regular meetings.
Second Tuesday, yeah, there would be public safety. You could maybe start something at 2, but if pickup is at, not till 4:30 yet. That could potentially work a second Tuesday afternoon or second Tuesday evening.
I think with the Center Region Anti-Bias Coalition meeting, then that would make it a little tricky for folks.
Is that second Tuesday evening?
I believe so.
Or fourth?
I see it currently as February 8th.
Okay, Dave, what was the thought on the 2 to 4 on second Tuesday?
Yeah, I think that could work. I don't know if there's any variables that I'm missing, but I don't think that there's any standing conflicts that recur. with that time frame, whatever the board wants to do, we'll make it work.
Hillary?
Are we keeping this up? Are we allotting 1 hour or 2 hours for this?
I don't know. I was looking for a window just to see if what our cushion was. I don't know if we've fully decided on that yet. What's that time period for everyone before we move on? Anywhere between 2 and 4 on second Tuesday. Okay.
That works for me. I know March, I won't be able to do that day. It works for February, probably April. But
So
maybe we'll
it
cancel that one.
looks like we're tentatively saying that that window might work for all of us, even if we don't want to schedule the whole window. Do we
So
want to say?
second Tuesday, what time did you say?
I said a window of 2 to 4. I was just going like between public safety and pickup of school, but
Mhm.
so, because if we did then 2 to 3, right, and we might run over a little bit, but then nobody would get in, into a
bind.
pinch.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got tentatively 2 to 3, second Tuesday as a work session or executive session as needed. And that would work for February? Wait. Is that like tomorrow? No, it's a week from tomorrow, right?
Yeah, that would be next Tuesday. Yeah, that works for me. March is the only one I know of that wouldn't work for me.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is because we're going to have that zoning work session then.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that you're going to be there, Lisa, for that. So,
Yeah,
okay.
if we do that next week, 2 to 4. Yeah.
Do we have time for advertising? Yes. Okay. All right. So looks like we've got our zoning work session that the doodle poll failed on is scheduled now for Tuesday, February 8th at 2 o'clock. And then we're going to schedule a recurring work session Tuesdays for 2 o'clock, starting at 2 o'clock for an hour, with the intention of ending in an hour and maybe some overage. Okay. All right. Speak now. All right. It looks like we have come to a decision. All right. Thank you, everyone. We've just got communications to the board. Would anyone care to provide any that they received? Okay. Next up, calendar items. The only thing I think that's changed is Park and Rec Committee has, I believe, canceled their meeting that we see on that's listed here. Other than that, everything's on, and we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks.
Everybody.